Beats Music.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Literary and Cultural Studies Division, UPLB Department of Humanities, in partnership with Pelicultura, the Calabarzon Film Festival 2021, and the UPLB Arts Society, is happy to present this year's yung 3G conversation. Salamat po sa pagdalo, salamat sa ating mga speakers at sa mga makakasama natin. Okay. So, ilang paalala lang po sa ating how while the session is ongoing. Please avoid turning on your cameras throughout the duration of the program unless given permission by the organizers. Kindly use this chat box to send in your comments and insights during the lecture or reply to the comments of the other attendees. We only ask that you keep your messages related to the topic being discussed. And then, please stay on mute. If you would like to speak, click the raise hand button so the moderator may call you to speak. During the Q&A, you may type your questions in the Zoom chat box. Meron pa ba? We will be collating questions that are of the same nature to maximize our time for the Q&A. So feel free to ask. We will highly appreciate your questions para mas maging productive yung discussion natin. Then at the end of the session, please let us know your thoughts by answering our survey form. Then here's the link. If you have any immediate concerns, please let us know by sending a private message to any of our facilitators in the Zoom chat box. Thank you very much. So, in partnership with UPLB Peliculab, this year's Yung PG conversation is also part of Pelicultura, the Calabarzon Film Festival 2021. So we're inviting you to the festival events as flashed on the screen. Ito po yung schedule natin. Sana makadalo kayo. So yeah. At simulan na po natin yung program with the LACS Division Head, Professor Gerard Eusebio, for the opening remarks. Gerard?
Thank you, Jael. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for choosing to be here to spend a couple of hours of your Monday to be in this GECon. To our guests who came here out of your own vision, we appreciate your presence. I give my most special hello, of course, to the students who specifically chose Hume 3, Reading, Film, TV, and the Internet, as one of your GE electives. It's been about a month since our classes started, and I know you're enjoying Hume 3 so far. We're trying to look at our records, but I think this is actually the first Hume 3 GECon. And it's definitely the first one since the pandemic broke. And a lot of you would agree, it's been TV and the internet that have maintained our connection to the world. When we have to retreat here, or they could have been the means for us to at Fiona Gray, our poor and very sad reality. Many of us are still escaping every now and then. Like me, I gave in and I just finished Squid Game on Netflix. Tapos kahapon naman ay Dekada 70 ni Chito Esronio. So yeah, TV and films, sure, they can help us escape. But where we go when we watch them is of utmost importance to us and is something that we all desperately need to interrogate. Do we really escape our present, our poor and very sad reality, or do we simply jump from one reality to another, from one truth to another? And in this digital age of information, where our screens are gateways into a vast array of news, ideas, thoughts, experiences, both truthful and deceitful, when criticality is rare, more than ever, we need to be having discussions about the media that we consume. So we'll get to do that today and perhaps even get a forecast of the things we will see in the coming months, specifically from our regional films as the industry continues to respond and be changed by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have here today our esteemed guests, film scholars, and critics to help enrich this necessary and timely conversation. On behalf of all the people and offices who've made this event possible, our partner org, Comartsoc, and all our dedicated student volunteers, Professor Jael, Professor Moy, Dr. Dex, the Department of Humanities, Pelicolab, CES Dean's Office, the UPLBGE program, OVCAA, and of course the Office of the Chancellor, and Professor Catherine Gonzalez, who is Pelicultura 2021's Festival Director slash punong abala of everything. I welcome you all to this Hume 3G conversation. Thank you very much.
Maraming salamat, Gerard, for that introduction. And in addition, to further set your expectations for this year's GE conversation, yung 3 GE Con. This conversation aims to tackle the status of regional filmmaking during the time of pandemic and its possible directions vis-a-vis our current socio-political systems. In the first part of the forum, the panel consisted of Hubert TV, filmmaker Gail Osorio, filmmaker and producer, and Jean-Claire D, film professor, filmmaker, writer, and media artist, will share their views and personal experiences on their current filmmaking practices, the challenges and restrictions they have encountered, and their coping mechanisms and significant adjustments throughout the production process. With their filmmaking experiences before and during this pandemic, they will also give their insights regarding the trajectories of regional filmmaking in the country. And as the chair of the NCCA Cinema Committee, Dr. Rolando Tolentino will further discuss the trajectories on the second part of the forum. The lecture will also explore the roles and initiatives of the institution in bridging the gaps on the present climate of regional filmmaking. So to introduce our panelists for today, we have Hubert TV. Hubert TV is a producer, editor, cinematographer, writer, and director. He has a degree in fine arts, major in advertising from San Carlos University, Cebu, and the Philippine Women's University, Manila. He owns and manages Shotlist Productions and has participated in several Cinemalaya editions. His first full-length feature, 1957, a Farm Film Festival 2008 finalist, was screened at Sharm El-Sheikh Film Festival in 2019 and won him the Special Jury Award at the European Philippine International Film Festival 2019. Mabasa Kan Pasyon won Best Screenplay in Cinemalaya Independent Film Festival 2020. Screened at CCP's Tuloy Po Kayo, Cinema Region 2020, the Activista Human Rights Festival 2020, and it's also a finalist at Sinag Maynila Film Festival 2020. And it was also screened at the Festival de Cannes Court Metraz Short Film Corner 2021. So our first speaker is Sir Hubert TV. Our next panelist will be Gail Osorio. Gail is a film producer. She's also a Busan Asian Film School's Pusnik Screenwriters Residency, Berlinale Talents, and TFL Script Lab Story Editor Alumni. She produced Keith Deliguero's feature films Scalawags in 2013 and Lily 2016, and short film Babylon 2017, which was selected for the Berlinale Film Festival Shorts Competition. Osorio is currently developing the feature version of Babylon, selected at EAV Ties That Bind 2019 and Locarno Open Doors Lab 2020. And Cangrejos, selected at the Southeast Asian Fiction Lab and Hong Kong Asian Film Financing Forum. In between producing films, she helps run the annual Binisaya Film Festival in Cebu City. And then the last part of our last panelist is Jean Claire D. Jean Claire D is a filmmaker, writer, media artist, and educator from Mindanao. She holds an MA in Media Studies and Film from U School in New York. She is currently an assistant professor in the Communication and Media Studies program of the University of the Philippines, Visayas. Currently, she is the founder and head of www.storiesbeyond.com, an audiovisual initiative envisioning total restorative and transformative narratives of communities beyond single story. Her documentary film A House in Pieces, produced under Stories Beyond, was awarded the Golden Hercules Award at the Kasseler Doc-Fest in Germany in 2020. It recently won the Best Documentary Award at the Mimesis Documentary Festival in Boulder, USA. Her films and experimental video pieces have been screened at various festivals and exhibitions here and abroad. Her literary works have been published in various literary publications. This year, she was chosen as one of the fellows for the 9-month Connecting Stories program of the Scottish Documentary Institute. Muli, salamat po sa pagpapaunlak sa invitation namin na maging parte ng yung 3GE conversation this year. So, let's start the discussion. Sir Hubert, maybe you can
Hello.
open the floor or
Okay. At gusto ko lang sana simulan dun sa narinig niyo ako? Okay siya? Okay, audio?
yes po.
Okay, ayun. Gusto ko simulan dun sa short film ko, yung process ng paggawa ng short film ko, yung Pabasakan Pasyon na nanalo siya ng best screenplay last year sa Cinemalaya. Gusto ko sanang i-share yung gusto ko i-share yung isang clip. Pwede ba ako mag-share ng clip?
Ay, sure po.
Okay. Okay, mag-share ako ng clip. Okay. Ayan, okay. Ayan, isa siya sa mga clip doon sa isa siya sa mga clip. Narinig niyo ako? Isa siya sa mga clip na ginamit ko sa Pabasakan Pasyon. Tapos gusto ko rin i-share sana yung isa pang clip kasi tricky din siya yung ginawa ko na yun kasi parang yun nga parang yung effect niya. So yung output niya siya, naging ganito siya. Ano ba yun? Ayan, nasi-share, ayan. Wow, hindi ka makikita siya. Okay. Wait, parang ang gulo. Wait. Paano ba? Stop sharing. Tapos share ko ulit. Mali. Wait, sorry. Ayun, wait lang ha. Teka. Gusto ko lang pakita sana yung output niya. Yung nangyari sa kanya doon. Wait.
Sir Hubert,
Yes.
pag-click niyo po yung share, pwedeng i-check niyo din po yung audio para may audio kaming marinig.
Okay. Sige. Okay.
So,
wow, wait lang. Nagkaka-problem lang. Okay. Ayun. Tapos, ang hirap po. First, hindi siya ma-play. So, pero na-share ko sa inyo yung paano yung process ng isa. So, gusto ko na i-share yung pangalawa. Ayan, okay, share ko na lang siya. Ayan, okay. Ayan na siya, okay. So, ayan na siya, yung na-shoot ko. Kung nakikita niyo yung nasa reels ako, ito na yung output niya. So, ayun, pinakita ko yung output nun. So, Ayun, so maraming tricky din kasi nangyari dun sa shoot na yun. Kasi nung time na nag-shoot ako nun, tatlo lang talaga kami nag-shoot. So, nag-start din ako, so wala din akong script. So, nung time na yun, talagang tinagpi-tagpi ko lang. Then yung reason ko dun, kasi nagbakasyon ako sa Bicol eh. So, may house kami dito sa Bicol. So, ginawa ko, parang gusto kong maging useful ako. So, umuwi ako pag mga Holy Week tsaka holiday. So, Holy Week yung tiniming ko. Tapos, sinut ko yung, tinapture ko yung Holy Week na nangyayari sa Calabanga. Ano siya, malapit siya sa Naga City, kung alam niyo yung Naga City. So, siya din yung last na Holy Week before ng pandemic. Siya yung 2019. So, gusto ko pa sana mag-share ng isang clip. It's, ayan, okay. Ano siya, siya yung sinut ko ng parang kailangan ko siyang i-shoot kasi ano talaga, kailangan ko siya i-shoot ng one take and then na-pull off ko siya. Kasama siya din sa short film. Ayun. So, gusto ko lang i-share din sa clip na yun na parang sobrang ano lang talaga siya, 6:15 na yun eh. So, parang one take lang siya na ganun. So, parang hindi kailangan magkamali, ganun. So, parang gusto ko lang ipakita doon. Tapos, kasi sobrang ganda rin at sobrang kapal nung shot kasi sobrang daming tao. So, ginamit ko yung tao doon. Tapos, usually, yung sa eksena kasi yun, sa kabila sila tumatawid. So, naglalakad sila. So, parang ginawa naming dalawa nung partner ko na parang pinapunta sila sa kabila para din sila gano'n. As a filmmaker, parang kailangan mong dumiskarte para magkaroon ka ng kwento, para lakasan mo yung loob mo, no? Para gumanda yung pelikula. Kasi sinamantala ko kasi Holy Week noon eh. So, magandang experience sa akin yun kasi parang ang hirap mag-deal sa parang para sa akin na-feel ko na mas okay na parang mas maliit yung production ko, parang dalawa, tatlo lang kami gumagawa. So parang mas na-manipulate namin. Tapos mapapansin nyo rin, hindi masyadong tumitingin yung tao sa camera kasi hindi sila parang natatakot na parang malaki yung setup, na parang ganito. So parang siguro advantage din na parang 2 to 3 person lang yung nagsushoot. Ganun. So yun yung isa kong experience doon sa short film na yun. Ayan.
Hubert, in the context of regional filmmaking, at 'di ba na-mention mo na shoot mo siya sa Naga and you're from Bicol. Malaki ba yung factor that you're shooting within your space and the fact that you've mentioned na hindi walang masyadong pake yung tao that you are shooting. So will you consider that as a factor during the production?
Advantage din kasi yun na parang maliit nga yung crew. So parang siguro tinitignan niyo yung production. Wala, parang lang yan, classroom, team. Pero usually pag ako, nag-shoot ako sa mga ganong eksena, sinasabi ko talaga student ako. Student ako na UP. Usually ginagamit talaga UP. Tapos sasabihin na, UP, sige mo, yan, sige. Tapos susuportahan ka nila. Napaka-supportive ng mga locals. Tapos, as in talagang, sila, hindi tumitingin sa camera, sinasabihan pa nila sa kabilang makipag-cooperate, ganyan. So parang advantage din sa akin kasi yung mga tao talaga dito, grateful sila na parang tumutulong talaga sila, di ba? Compare sa city, di ba? Parang ang gugulo, nagpapasaway pa. Dito talagang supportive sila. Ikaw pa ipapakain kami, minsan parang pinakain pa kami, ganun, parang trinit pa kami nung parang house na pinagsyutan namin. So parang iyon, parang grateful kami na maganda rin na home court. Parang feeling ko nga home court ko tong Bicol. Tapos hindi lang siya talaga dahil sa maganda yung location. Yung tao talaga yung asset dito. Sobrang supportive yung mga tao. Ayun.
Gail, Claire, just in case may maalala din kayong experience na similar halimbawa dun sa mini-mention ni Hubert, just feel free to comment para 'di ba mas dire-diretso din yung discussion even if it's not your turn yet. Baka sakaling may naalala kayo na similar experiences. Yeah. Okay, Hubert, sorry.
Mm. Ayun. Tapos nangyari kasi dun, so walang script. So yung pinaka-character ko din sa short film ko kasi, teacher ko siya nung high school. So hindi niya alam yung gagawin niya. So parang nawiwirduhan din siya kasi wala kaming script. Sabi ko gusto ko lang talaga i-capture yung Holy Week nitong na yun na pala yung last na Holy Week na after before pandemic. So so yung sinot namin siya, hiwa-hiwalay. So parang chinap-chap ko siya. Na gusto ko sana mag-share ng clip. May clip ako dito. Wait. Wait. Gusto ko na i-share yung isang clip. Check ko lang siya. Ayan. So yan, mag-share ako ng isang clip. Wait lang, mag-share lang ako ng clip.
Hubert, walang audio. Maybe you can reshare it.
Meron siyang audio eh. Wait.
Maybe you can also illuminate us on a very short premise of this project.
Ayan. Yung clip kasi nito, sinut ko nga siya ng chop-chop. So, yung ibang mga anggulo ng camera, ibang day ko siya sinut. So, parang dinaya-daya ko siya kasi nagkaroon akong problema din sa actor kasi yung actor dapat meron siyang balbas eh.
Okay.
So, hindi namin siya ma-pull off na walang balbas kasi sobrang ipapikein ko siya, mahalata siya kasi naka 4K ko siya sinut. So, yun nakatalikod siya, ibang araw siya. Tapos, eto nakaharap siya, ibang araw din. So, gumawa ko ng two characters. Ginawa ko, yung isang character niya, kapatid niya. So, nangyari, gumawa ulit ako ng isang character dahil lang sa accident na parang nag-ahit siya ng bigote. So, eto, dumating yung kapatid niya. Siya talaga yung yan talaga yung itsura niya nung nakatalikod na shot. Ayan, so parang karamihan ng eksena dito talagang hinil ko siya. As in, ginawan ko siya ng Ayan. Gusto ko rin i-share sana din yung gusto ko i-share yung okay, wag na lang. Hindi ko na kasi parang dinaya ko siya. Ayan. Yun lang yung doon, yung premise doon na parang dinaya ko yung mga eksena. Kasi yun yung nangyari. So, gusto ko lang yung lesson lang sa akin, parang, yun nga yung continuity. Tapos, kasi hindi rin klaro yung script. So, parang magulo siya. Na parang yung teacher ko nga parang sabi niya, saan ba tayo papunta? Parang, ano ba to? Anong eksena to? So, parang sabi ko, magtiwala ka lang sa akin. Ganyan. So, parang hinihil ko siya. So, yung lesson sa akin dun, yung script talaga nagbabago siya kahit last minute ng shoot. Dahil, nakakatulong. Tapos, yung experience ko din dun na nag-ahit siya. So parang lesson din sa akin na parang ilang minutes lang dapat pag-shoot ka, mag-isip ka ng bagay na parang na magamit yun. So dun sa short film din kasi siya, DJ din siya, may radio program din siya. So parang dun sa short film, gumawa din ako na eksena na pinakita ko siya na radio, siya. So parang multiple na lang. So parang habang tumatagal yung shoot namin, kumakapal na yung story. So,
Okay.
Ayun. Tapos sabi nga nila, ba't nanalo ng best screenplay? Yan, wala nga siyang script. So Natatawa ako. Parang yun yung nangyayari sa akin. So parang challenging din kasi yung nangyayari sa akin na kumapal yung script. Ayun.
I'm also curious, have you started a project during the pandemic? And then how is the shooting or the production different? May, anything you've started?
Ito kasi before ng pandemic eh. So parang
Yeah.
yung after ng pandemic, talagang nakapag-shoot ako dito. Kasi nakapag-shoot ako, ginagawan ko na siya ng part 2, pero nasa 50% ako hanggang ngayon. So parang ginagawa ko ngayon yung character, tayong character, Eita siya eh. Gumawa ako ng character na Eita, i-relate ko siya dun sa character. Tapos gagawin ka ulit siya na nangyari yun, Holy Week din siya. So ganun yung ginagawa kong part 2 ngayon, yung ginawa ko.
So,
Yung ginagawa ko ngayon,
how do you plan on, di ba, na-mention mo na it's an ongoing project. And in consideration with the restrictions of our current situation, may ganun ka bang plano when it comes to that kind of production?
Kasi yun nga, parang 2-3 lang kami sa production. So parang yung ginagawa ko lang ngayong pandemic. Ginawa ko kasi bumili ako ng saliva test. So parang mura lang siya, parang 350 pesos na yung saliva test. So if ever may papasok akong artista, sinasaliva test namin siya before and after. So parang yun yung precaution talaga namin na para ma-safe yung community. Tapos all the time parang usually naman yung eksena ko talagang isa lang yung tao, malayo yung camera. Naka 85mm ako, naka 50 ako hanggang 85. So parang 5 meters away ako lagi sa artista. Nagpapalit ako ng lente para hindi ako lumapit. So ginagawa namin yun kasi parang yun yung respeto namin dun. So if ever kami nagdala ng COVID dito, parang buong data community magkakaroon kasi di talaga sila nagmamas. So ayun din yung precaution ko namin pala na mag-shoot. So ngayon, last 2 weeks ago, parang nakapag-shoot ako ng eksena. Parang nakapag-shoot ako ng 2 eksena. So, ayun. Pag maganda yung weather, maganda yung timing, nag-shoot ako. So, parang dito kasi sa Bicol kasi sobrang ulan ng ulan dito. Parang cloudy siya lagi. So, parang ang hirap din mag-shoot ngayon. Tapos ngayon may bagyo nga. Tapos mabuti hindi siya tumuloy dito ulit. So, ayun. So, yun yung ginagawa ko ngayon.
So these are yung ganung adjustments that's in consideration of the pandemic. Kasi you've mentioned before na nag-a-adjust ka depende dun sa mismong shoot.
Sa weather.
But then with the current situation, kailangan ba mas naplano mo siya?
Kasi yung
grabe ba yung difference dun sa klase ng ganong production?
Sa akin kasi gusto kong gumawa ng sarili kong cinema. Parang ginagawa ko lang siyang pang-hobby. Parang hobby ko, fun lang sa akin. Parang hindi ko siya siniseryoso. Parang yun yung ginagawa ko sa akin ngayon. So parang hindi ako stress na parang kailangan ko gawin to. Kailangan ganito yung ending, ganito yung story. Parang gumagawa ko ng sarili ko. Kasi parang hindi maganda pag wala kang producer na parang, yun din. Kasi pag may budget akong content, nag-shoot ako. So parang, kasi kailangan magbigay ng honorarium sa mga tao. So parang, para sa akin, yun din. So parang chop-chop. And then, nagagawa ko yung sarili kong cinema na hindi ako dun sa sariling, di ba, pattern ng ginagawa ng ibang indie ngayon na parang gustong sumabay, ganun. So parang ako, hindi rin ako pressure. Yun yung feeling ko. Yun.
Yeah. And I'm curious with Gail's experiences on that kasi 'di ba mas producing yung mga projects mo as vis-a-vis halimbawa yung kay Hubert na siya yung may control dun sa ano. So how do you manage that before?
What do you mean?
And during the pandemic?
Actually, may slide presentation ako about yung whole producing process ko during the pandemic this year. So I think binigay ko sa team niyo yung slide. If turn ko na ba? Is it?
Hubert, may idadagdag ka pa ba or may dun sa discussion natin?
May tanong. Wala magtatanong.
May Q&A tayo sa dulo.
Okay.
So, oo.
Ayan. Feeling ko kasi, di ba nadi-divide naman sa independent produced films and mga commercial films. So parang nandun kasi ako sa independent produced films. So parang, for me, parang masasabi ko dapat kung gagawa ka ng sarili mong cinema or magpuproduce ka ng sarili mong film, dapat aralin mo talaga lahat from the idea, from the script, from editing to to submission sa film sa mga festival. So ganun, parang gusto ko lang i-share na parang dapat alamin mo yung camera mo, alamin yung capability mo as a focus puller, 'di ba? Kasi ikaw nang focus lahat, 'di ba? So parang yun yung parang gusto kong i-share na parang dapat alamin lahat ng yung process ng camera, lalo na yung technical side. Ayun.
Okay.
Ayun lang.
Salamat, Hubert. Ita-transition ko, kasi sobrang, yun nga, ang ganda nung mga na-mention mo na points na may ganun kang leeway because it's independent. And ang ganda lang din niyang i-connect with Gail's position and her projects, I guess. So, I think we can proceed with Gail. And then, Hubert, balikan ulit natin yung ibang
Sige.
points kung may nakalimutan kang
Sige.
i-mention sa Q&A. Salamat.
Sige.
Pull up ako ng slides.
Ready na po.
Ayan.
Ayan.
May nakikita kayo? Wala ko makita.
Nag-share screen na po pero medyo hindi pa po nag-load yung slides. That's just
Okay.
Thank you po. I will advise you, Ms. Gail, if it's already share screen.
Yes. If allowed ako mag-share, pwede ko din naman i-try.
Tech, maybe we can just allow Ms. Gail since we're having some technical difficulties with the sharing. Yes, Ms. Gail, you can share your screen po. Thank you po.
Okay. Nakikita niyo pa?
Yes, Ms. Gail.
Yes, all right. So I wanted to start with Archipelago. So as mentioned kanina sa introduction, I'm also part of Binisaya Film Festival. My partner and director Keith Deligero started 2020 the Archipelago Lab. So 2020, wala kaming ginagawa. So we decided to help out filmmakers who have projects. So we help them develop. And from this lab, we have already produced 2 projects. So that's Brand X and It's Raining Frogs Outside. So this is the lab. It was an invite only kasi parang may time tayo, so let's try and help out kids who have projects. So we had 5 projects, 5 participants. Merong short film, merong series, merong feature. And then we guided them on, development and where to submit, things like that. For It's Raining Frogs Outside, it was by Stella Paiso. We guided her submission to Q Cinema Short Films. And when she got shortlisted, we helped her pitch. Nag-mock pitch kami with the entire group. They gave their feedback and everything. So when we made this group of filmmakers, I think it really made a difference in us. Kasi we felt like that we were helping people and then they were getting their projects produced. So one was that one of those were It's Raining Frogs Outside. It's in Q Cinema Shorts right now. It's in post. And the next was Brand X. Brand X is an animated short film. When FDCP proposed that they were commissioning short films by regional filmmakers, we asked the group to submit stories. And yun nga, may napiling isa, it was Brand X by Michael Mante. So this guy right here. So everyone got paid for their contribution and everything. We got green-lighted to do Brand X. So it was early May this year. Yes, na-greenlight yung project Brand X. So the number one challenge in producing in the pandemic is travel. Ang daming permits. So, and then Keith and I, we have a child. He's 5 years old at that time. So hindi pwedeng bumiyahe. We couldn't take him on the plane to fly back to Cebu. So what we did was my parents drove from Leyte all the way to Taytay and then pauwi. So it was a 20-hour drive. Then when we got to Ormoc, we rode a boat to Cebu. In the meantime, I was taking the safety officer training by FDCP Dole Bosch because required na ngayon na may safety officer sa shoot. And if you're in the region, medyo mahirap maghanap ng safety officer for film. May safety officer, sa construction and other industries. Pero for film, medyo mahirap when you're a regional filmmaker. So it was up to me, and then we had 3 other people from Binasaya Movement to do the training. So ngayon, 4 kami na may safety officer license. And then, the project was also under FPCP, DOLE, DOH. So we had to do all the protocols. We couldn't not get a safety officer. So the second challenge in making the short film is switching from live action to animation. Because when Michael Mante submitted the project, it was live action. We decided that it was too risky to shoot at the time sa Cebu. Cases were still going high, and we decided to do it animation. And lucky enough, FDCP supported that decision, even though that meant na doble yung budget, triple yung budget. It's very, very, very expensive. And we also had to adapt because we've never made animation. So we had to adapt to the animation process. Diba, when you shoot, take all the coverage you have, and then you play around in the editing room. This time we had to edit the first part. We had to decide all the shots. These are all the shots. It was a right side. We had 130 shots decided na, which was very different than what we are used to. We never worked with shot lists or storyboards before, but this time we had to. And also one of the thing when shooting in the pandemic is yun nga, yung budget mo magtataas because of the safety protocols expenses. For animation, for a short film, production for a short film would usually happen 1 week, 2 weeks. When we decided to make it animation, we had to stay for 3 months. Kasi we only had 2 animators, and then they're used to making animation projects for a year. We had to squish it in 3 months. So for 3 months, 6 kami sa team. For 3 months, we had to provide for everything. Meals, snacks, the rent for this bubble house, utilities, everything. So expenses pa lang sa bubble house, I think umabot ng 200,000. So that could already be budget for a short film. Pero safety lang siya, safety expenses. Also, we had to pay everyone for 3 months kasi 3 months silang mawawala sa trabaho. Wala silang other freelance jobs. They had to stay locked in this house. So we had to pay everyone the right amount of fee. So wala namang exploitation. And so ako na yung safety officer. So this is what I did. Nag-safety briefing ako ng everyone in the house. Basically, I said, walang pwede lumabas. That's it. How to live in the bubble house with 5 other people. I'm also here in the photo. I have a fogging machine. So parang every month, we disinfected the entire house. And ako din yung naglalag ng temperature ng everyone. So that was our experience in the bubble house. Nakalabas na kami lahat. Wala na lahat sa bubble house. And then I flew back to here sa Luzon to do this other short. Yung kay Stella naman. So lumabas na yung budget ni Q Cinema. It's Raining Frogs Outside. Yun yung title. Stella came from Zambales. So it was important for her to shoot in Zambales. So, ayun na naman, yung mga travel permits, mga shooting permits, everything. Ilagay ko dito Murphy's Law kasi everything that could go wrong in a production went wrong in this production, feeling ko. There was only 6 of us originally sa crew. Ito, picture kami yung lahat. Artista namin yung sa gitna. So actually 5 lang yung natira. We were originally 6 in the team. Dito sa house ko, nag-quarantine kami for 2 weeks before going to Zambales para lang safe everyone. Sure kami na negative kami lahat when we traveled. So at the end of our quarantine na 2 weeks, ready na kami pumunta ng Zambales. The location that we got, they called na may staff sila na nag-positive. So the LGU had to shut down the establishment. So we had to wait na safe to operate na sila again. And it took us 1 month. So na-delay kami ng 1 month. 1 month kaming naka-quarantine. So we had 2 weeks quarantine plus 1 month. So tagal namin nag-quarantine dito sa bahay. Again, we had to provide for everyone food, 1 month food, meals, snacks, electricity, rent, everything. So actually that delay cost us a huge chunk of our budget. So we decided to ask for pledging. So mga online pledging kami sa internet, sa Instagram, sa Facebook. Close na yung pledging, but if may gustong mag-pledge, pwede pa naman. Pero yun, what else happened? Okay. So nung nag-okay na sila, si LGU na okay, you can shoot, one of our crew members had to go home na kasi di na siya pwede, may ibang schedule siya. So yun, 6 na nga lang kami sa team, nabawasan kami ng isa, so 5 na lang yung crew, plus the actress. So ito yung nangyari. So all of us had to take on 2 roles, sometimes 3 roles. Dito sa lower right, that's our AD. She's also the VFX supervisor. Good thing is that my team, we do post. So mga editors, mga VFX, alam namin to lahat. So it kind of made it easier to do 2 to 3 roles at the same time. Sa upper right photo is me and my AD. Nag-ano kami ng sahig. Pinapatuyo namin yung sahig. So usually you would have an art department, no? Art dep, pakilinis, paki-something. This time, wala ako yung gumagawa lahat. In the middle photo, you see our DOP picking up the props, and ako din. So kami lahat, wala kaming wala kaming art dep. So we all had to be art dep. So when we shouted art dep, and then kami din yung pupunta. In the first photo, you'll see us, dito kami kumakain. So we still continued to do the social distancing because we were still in a public place. Yung place na pinag-shootan namin is like a big, ba siya? Bed and breakfast siya, na may restaurant, na may art gallery, na may something. So public place siya. So we still had to keep using our masks, social distance, and everything. Ba na dito? Yun, 1 week. So we were in Zambales for 1 week. Good thing for this short film is that it's hybrid. So like 50% live action, 50% animation. So we only had to shoot 3 scenes. But they had like very heavy VFX things. So kaya siya inabot ng 1 week to shoot. We really had to take our time and wala na yung shoot lang na shoot. No, everything had to be timed. Everything had to be limited. Di kami pwede lumagpas ng, 10 hours. After 5, tapos na yung shoot. So, you wouldn't see that usually in an independent regional shoot, film production. But now we kind of have to impose it. And then we also had consultants on call. So, yeah, dahil nga 6 lang kami. So, our main VFX artist, we would send him footage every day and we would consult, okay na ba to? Do we need to reshoot and everything? We also had our DOP on call because she is stuck in Bohol. So she was supposed to be our main DOP. Itong DOP namin na dito sa picture, he's a photographer. So kind of the same. So sabi namin siya, ikaw na mag-DOP, photographer ka naman. So but we kept calling the DOP to have our shots, footage checked. Okay, so in the meantime na delay kami, it was important for me na i-rehearse everything. Even though magkaiba yung environment or whatever, lighting, etc. At least the actress would know how to move, framing lahat ng shots, camera movement. We rehearsed everything thrice. So basically, we shot the entire short film 4 times. Kasi we can't risk na going to somewhere else tapos hindi kami ready. So I wanted everyone to be ready. So lahat ng galaw namin, we've already done before. So it's just a matter of going to a place and doing the same things again. Parang kami nag-practice. Parang kami nag-play. Rehearsals and then go. Ayan. So yun lang yung 2 projects ko for this year. I didn't do anything for last year kasi natatakot pa ako mag-shoot. But this year, everyone is adapting. Parang wala nang reason na hindi mag-shoot. So we had to do it. But for the Binisaya, we took advantage of the everyone being at home, being online. So we did a lot of online activities. So the first one we did was the Distance Between Us. It was fundraising film festival last year. The proceeds went to provide PPE sa frontliners. And then during the main festival itself, we had Benham Rising. It was consultation/masterclass. So to continue to connect with the local filmmakers, we asked them, kamusta na kayo? May mga projects ba kayo? We can read them, we can give feedback. So I feel like this is very important to keep, moral pa? So something, just to keep something going, even though people can't go out to shoot, at least they can still work on their projects. And then this one, Exit, it's in partnership with KTX. It's a show. So I'm not involved with this one, but I really like this one because it was run by our interns. So the school called sa San Carlos, they have a cinema department. So one of the teachers are friends. She asked if we could accept interns, but we can't bring them to production. We can't lock them in our bubble house for 3 months. So we offered to let them run a show. So we did this. They interviewed filmmakers and then they edited their shows and then they put it on KTX. So it was all intern run. And I really like this program, even though hindi ako involved. And then 11/11, our next festival will be in November 11th. Please watch out for it. Sorry, nag-plug. So yeah, I guess in terms of yung question, how do filmmakers feel, distributing films online? Although I can't say it right now, but I can definitely say that it's medyo alienating siya for the filmmakers because one of the joys of filmmaking is being in the same room with your audience, hearing their reactions, feeling the excitement in the room and all of that. And wala na yun siya lahat, everything. So a lot of people who premiered online, medyo, masaya kasi nakapag-premiere, pero yun, malungkot din, bittersweet. So, hindi ko pa siya na-experience, I will experience it sa Q Cinema soon. Please watch out for It's Raining Frogs Outside by Maria Estela Paiso. Yun. Thank you.
Salamat, Gail. Sobrang nakaka-ground lang nung shinare mo kasi we can only imagine these things. But then, now that you're giving out details dun sa actual production, mas mahirap siyang i-process. Kasi, ang dali niya lang, the same way that when we were formulating the guide questions, diba, we're expecting this. But then, yun nga, yung sinabi ni Sir Roland sa comment na saga siya. And definitely, dun sa mismong process, ina-expect niyo yung worst. But then when you're actually there, it's still a lot different. For instance, na yung naka-plan siya is live action, tapos magiging animation siya. Diba? It's a very big shift dun sa production process and dire-diretso mag-domino effect siya with the rest of the schedules and everything. So, curious ako, gaano katagal nyo na laman na you have to do the shift? Yung biglaan siya?
Ko na maalala how long siya. Parang matagal kasi siya na, FDCP, di naman sila agad lalabas ng crunch. So there was quite a long time naman na pag-isipan siya when we already knew na definitely may project kami with them. So hindi lang namin sure kung kailan lalabas yung crunch or kailan siya mangyayari. This was last year, siguro mga June last year. We pitched the story to them. And then later on, meeting, we decided na ay baka mag-animation na lang kami. Good thing na okay naman sila. Siguro mga 6 months siguro din na back and forth with FTCP.
Yeah, and how, kasi na-mention mo na so far, naging smooth naman yung production, diba? But then, and it's still ongoing. So, may naisip ba kayong further plans para mas ma-handle yung current, yung ina-expect na aberya sa production? Or ang laking nagawa nung, yun nga, yung experience nyo ngayon?
Hindi muna ako mag-shoot again. Wait lang. Although I can definitely say na yung pagka-safety officer ko, it really helped. Kasi yun nga, aware ako sa everything. May guidebook na kailangan sundin. The DOLE went to our shoot to check. So may mga ganong things. Ang daming kailangan government agencies, barangay, city, DOLE. Ang daming kailangan i-coordinate. So medyo nakakapagod siya. Although, yun nga. Di muna siguro. Next year ulit.
I can imagine. Yeah. Salamat, Gabe. Sige, balikan ulit natin yung sakaling may maisip ding questions yung audience with what you've shared. That's a lot to take in na kasi nandun ka sa mismong eksena. So, mas nakakagulat pa rin siya. It's still surprising even though it's expected. So that's how I feel right now. Kasi sobrang dami nung kailangan mo talagang pagdaanan. Pero iba na kapag andun ka mismo. And I'm also curious to hear Claire ang dami-dami mong projects then residencies as well. So maybe you can share further about these experiences.
Okay, thank you. First of all, hi everyone. Thank you to Pilicultura for inviting me and the GE conference and the rest of the participants. I'm sorry if I'll cough sometimes because I'm getting over a flu and a respiratory tract infection. So actually, I wrote down because I have a hard time focusing my thoughts when talking. So I just wrote down some of the things that I need to talk about, and then I actually tried to answer all the points that you wanted me to talk about. So I'll start. I'll start with the impetus of me wanting to tell stories, and it's in relation to what's going on right now. And I'm sorry beforehand if I become a bit political in this talk because it's just how I am. Okay, so the silhouette of a dead soldier hanging from a telecommunications tower after he was shot by a sniper was the first memorable image I saw on TV. It was the People's Power Revolution. I was 9 years old, and the only thing that I was concerned about was the story behind the picture. While I heard a voiceover reporting the news, I still thought the story was incomplete. So I imagined scenarios of what could be behind the picture I just saw. Most of all, I wanted to play in a part in telling of that story. This curious desire to tell stories I had inherited from my mother, who taught me the power of communicating with words, sound, and pictures. Every night, packed like sardines in a small room of our apartment, we would listen to her tell of her experiences as an activist and a political detainee who experienced torture during her time, masked as bedtime tales of the martial law years. Morning, she taught us how to draw and paint with watercolors and encouraged us to create our own illustrated books. Over the years, I have learned not to take the power of story for granted. Reynolds Price said it well, and I quote, "A need to tell and hear stories is essential to the species Homo sapiens, second in necessity apparently, after nourishment and before love and shelter. Millions survive without love or home, almost none in silence. The opposite of silence leads quickly to narrative, and the sound of story is the dominant sound of our lives. From the small accounts of day's events to the vast incommunicable constructs of psychopaths," unquote. If we were to consider dictators as psychopaths, then the constructs that shape their narrative should be seen as equally powerful as our own narratives. Let us use story to subvert the spectacles that rock our lives, turn our backs at the siege of soldiers planning to break our protests, and win the battle of the story. It is also important that we continuously take into account how alternative storytelling can inform, inspire, and influence communities. In an increasingly mediated world, it is a challenge for storytellers and media practitioners to also problematize the way we clarify, intensify, and interpret reality in the media. More than ever, until now and at present, the power of storytelling through pictures and words and sound still holds, just like the way the image of the soldier on TV was etched in my mind forever. Susan Sontag once said that to take pictures is to collect the world. I actually subscribe to this statement. It doesn't apply only to photography, but also to film and video. That's the good thing that a camera affords. It's like falling in love with the world once you peer into the viewfinder, choose the subject, then click the shutter button. The collection starts from there. And along with that is really a beginning of telling a narrative. Everything that is framed by a camera contributes to narrative. I find that very powerful. I think a good story should first successfully engage the viewer or reader or listener in whatever ways it was intended to do so. I've been teaching Arts 1 in UP Visayas, and I always say that a work of art is never complete in its meaning making without an audience. And that's part of this dialogic structure. I also think that a good story must have clear message, something important to say or comment on. Many stories have retained their timelessness, even if they are commenting on a specific social, historical, political, economic context of the time, because they resonate universally as a commentary also about humanity. In 2016, I founded the initiative Stories Beyond, WW Stories Beyond, because I wanted to tell stories of marginalized communities that don't use victimization as a lens and that don't treat these communities as spectacles of tragedy. Most of the media work about these communities focus on tragic stories, but a few tell stories of hope, resilience, and the power of these communities to strive to restore their lives after disaster, conflict, or even structural violence like poverty. I want to put a human face to these issues. The restorative narrative framework of storytelling aims to focus on sustained inquiry and long-form pieces. Stories Beyond is dedicated to telling restorative and transformative narratives of communities beyond the single story. The use of the term single story is inspired by Chimamanda Adichie's observation that most stories of communities often just focus on one aspect, and that aspect becomes the single story of the community that are replicated in many platforms, forming a stereotype of that community. And this view, I have to qualify, is actually influenced by my being a Mindanaoan, which is a region that's often, displayed or represented in media platforms are war-torn. I want to go beyond that single story and offer different narratives that reflect the community despite the sufferings that often represent them in mainstream media. When doing a documentary project, it is really important for me to engage with the community, getting to know my subjects' individual stories, and how these stories can be told in the context of their community is very important. I usually start with research first, and when I do pre-production, and that entails such a long process, I think like talking to some people, they really expect that the production is the longest, but for documentary, I think the research is as long as the production. That's part of my story development, which takes a long time before I can move to the production phase. Really immersing in the community is very important for me. My creative process involves starting with conceptualization. I read a lot of sources before I conceptualize a video artwork or even a film, because I'm also a writer and words are important to me. My video pieces are different from my documentary and narrative films because they are more internal explorations of the self. The common aspect between my video work and my filmmaking is that both of these are always grounded on a questioning of social and historical issues, notions of migration or forced migration and displacement, being that I'm from Mindanao, and it's a common narrative in where I come from, and fluidity of identities. I always look to theoretical sources to inform my work, and I'd like to think that my foundation is really philosophical based on critical theory, cultural studies, and because I studied at the New School, my foundation is really I forgot the Frankfurt movement. In the past, I created a short experimental essay film titled Walay Naadiri, problematizing my hybrid identity as a Filipino Chinese. It has always been part of my artistic preoccupation, my being a third generation Filipino Chinese, and I decided to live and work in China for a few years because of this. I wanted to trace my lineage. But it was really hard to live in China because it's really a very autocratic society, and everything is, you are really under a lot of minders, especially if you're a foreigner. There you have like minders that follow you and you're not aware. It gets you paranoid. But I really tried to live there because I wanted to find my relatives. So when I arrived in Xiamen, ironically, I found a huge SM mall where my relatives were supposed to be living, and I laughed about this. It was a really rude awakening, and it took away my romanticism about China even more. So I left. Then in 2017, while researching for a documentary in the history of the protracted war in Mindanao, because BBL was being levied, so it was really important for me to tell that story. I decided to write and direct a short film exploring the possibilities of a former Ilaga fighter. For those who are not aware, the Ilaga was a paramilitary group composed of migrant settlers from the Panay area and some from the Ilocos, who settled in the Maguindanao area. Some parts of Mindanao now formed as BARM, and they were used by the Marcos regime to quell the Muslim rebellion. Just to give you an idea, because there's a lot of historical revisionism right now, and I think it's very important for us storytellers in where I come from to highlight these atrocities. So the story, I focus on the possibility because I found out in my research that after the Marcos regime and when when the Ilaga was, broken, a splinter, they splintered as a group. They were also called, they were also a cult group. I found out that some of the Ilaga fighters who are really, really old now were in Iloilo already. So I tried to fictionalize this and think about what if an old Ilaga fighter is confronted by her niece, who's a filmmaker and wanted to tell a story, but it was not a very, black and white story about good and evil. In my research about the Ilaga, for instance, or even the war in the Maguindanao, there is so many interconnections and blurring of lines between the Blaans, the Moros, and the Ilonggos, and somehow there's a lot of intermarriages between these ethnicities. For my recent full-length documentary film, A House in Pieces, which tells the story about the aftermath of the Marawi siege, and it was released worldwide last year, and just recently got nominated for Agawad Urian, which was a total surprise for us. The process was very organic. Manuel Gomez, my co-director, and I were first reacting to current events. Being a former journalist for Minda News covering peace and wars issues, the Marawi siege was a very personal story for me. So at the height of the siege, I thought I would go to the field with Manuel. I was first asked to report on the ground inside the battlefield. I knew I could do it since I have experience covering these stories in Mindanao. But I was with a German national, and it was very difficult at that time to gain permission. But then again, I thought, why should I go there in the fray where many are elbowing their way, and just to get the latest scoop, the latest tragedy, the latest number of casualties, the military strategies to add to the confusion and chaos and spectacle of war. There was also so many issues outside of the battlefield, especially the declaration of martial law in the whole Mindanao at that time. And there were so many unreported human rights abuses. So we decided to go to the evacuation centers. That's when we found our story. I listened to mothers, fathers, and children. We realized that we could follow this one family once they are able to return their homes after the war. We decided to stay on and film even after the siege ended. For me, it was important to tell the story of the attempts of reclaiming lost lives and getting back to normalcy. The attempt itself speaks of their humanity, not just as oppressed victims of war, but as human beings who have agency. Of course, though, the reality is that some of our characters and other Maranaos still haven't returned to their homes. It's been 4 years now, and they have been clamoring for this. The current administration has made so many promises they couldn't keep. I think for me, beyond our film, this is a time to reflect on how promises and basic services not being met will contribute to the cycle of breeding violent extremism in this part of Mindanao. It has been starting now with many skirmishes between ISIS-inspired groups in the Lanao area with the military. And this is also, in a sense, a long struggle. What with the US war on terror, not absent, but still silently ongoing in this part of the world. I think my current filmmaking practice is evolving more than ever because I've been also doing other media art forms and they all inform each other. Currently, I am a fellow with the Connect Stories program at the Scottish Documentary Institute, and I learned so many good things from the program about documentary filmmaking, not just production itself, but distribution and making your life more sustainable. Financial literacy is something that I noticed one of the issues that Mindanaoan filmmakers face today. They get a grant, they're happy, they think they're rich, then after production, they go back to their hand-to-mouth existence. I think we should have more programs to help filmmakers get out of this cycle. More than anything else, though, I'm still constantly learning. I've been discovering so many filmmakers from the global south, for a lack of better word, because I learned that that's a problematic term that speaks to my sensibilities and growing vision. What about the challenges and restrictions I have encountered? Well, I've always encountered challenges during my production process. I think that's always, normal, and it depends on the gravity of these challenges. One major challenge would be financial. You can't get a film funded, for instance, before I just gather friends and ask for help and do something without the budget. But now I realize that's very exploitative. So I have learned to pitch my film projects because of Stories Beyond. We started just producing, being our own producers, and now I realize that I need really experienced producers. But then again, I try to find film labs and funding partners, and just go out there and with a thick face and sell my story. And that's hard for me because I'm an introvert, but I had to learn. I remember when I was speaking in Korea in the DMZ International Documentary Film Festival, I went to the toilet 5 times before the pitch, and I felt like puking, and I had to relax so I could start the pitch. Another challenge is, of course, self-doubt. So these are very personal things, but to the more serious challenges I've encountered, we're really working within the system. I realize, and I might be controversial here, that I cannot work with film development programs that enable fascist governments, because it would make me think twice about the story I'm telling. I'll have to change this, especially since I've been working on stories that challenge, killings, corruption, human rights abuses. So I have to learn to negotiate my principles and my need to tell my story. One thing though, I trust NCCA because I know the people who work there and their track records and their principles. But honestly, I've been forced to just go outside our borders and look for grants in the international scene because it's very hard to produce something without money. The second major challenge is really dealing with police and military. As a documentary filmmaker covering sensitive issues, I'll tell you 2 stories. Number one, the first documentary that I was, before A House in Pieces, that we were supposed to tell, was about attempted assassination in a small Blaan community somewhere in Davao del Norte. The Blaan community is sandwiched in the middle of a banana plantation owned by the Florendos, who is known to be the financial backer of our current president. So it was an EJK, attempted EJK. So we went there, we stayed in the community, we immersed ourselves there. I followed and investigated this story. We had so many sources, but there was a lot of paranoia and fear in the neighborhood. We went through the protocols, we talked to the NCIP and so on. But then one day, an intelligence officer suddenly arrived and asked us questions, got our passports, our IDs, the usual. And it's not new for me to go into this, to experience this, because I've been a journalist, but it was more vivid and tangible, considering that you are in this context of, a lot of impunity and killing. So eventually we had to leave. We had to hurry and pack our bags and leave because he suddenly just said that I need you to go to the police station with me and visit and talk to the police. He made it sound like an invitation, but because I have protocols that I learned, so I know people already who to talk to. So I talked to my editor-in-chief before, and they all told us that that invitation is really not an invitation. No one would would be able to help us once we step into that police station. The second major challenge for me was filming A House in Pieces. Because of the bureaucracy, so many things like like layers of government agencies that are trying to protect the Marawi siege story. But there's one thing that I experienced. We were detained by the military one time when we were filming. I guess it's okay for me to be talking about this because the film is done. We were detained for one day, and it would have gone on if I wasn't able to call people like Samira Butok, Froilan Garliado, who was friends with the general at that time. And, they were just power tripping, but it was really interesting how we were not given food and water, but then the soldiers, the grunts, those in the rank and file, were very concerned with us. So they made sure to sneak in like water for us and so on. So, and it was really, I guess it's also a very post-colonial situation because I was with, a German national who's my co-director. So when they found out about it, they were like, oh, okay, it would be easy to let them go because we have to answer to the German embassy. But I was more fearful about my Maranao companions because we were brought into a place where a lot of human salvage victims at that time. There were so many because of the martial law. Were brought and they were dumped there. So my Maranao companions were so scared. They couldn't they were so scared because if we were released first, what would happen to them? So I really insisted that we stay together and that we are not going to be released first. And whatever, if they want the white guy to leave, pwede, but I really need to stay. So these are just two major challenges that I've experienced working with the system. My filmmaking experiences before and during this pandemic, it has changed immensely in so many aspects. Before the pandemic, I'm able to go to the field and shoot and not worry about getting sick. When the pandemic started, I suffered a lot of anxieties about getting the virus because at that time, there wasn't a lot of information coming out. So when the lockdown happened, I immediately isolated myself in my apartment in another town in the Philippines and didn't go out for days. My coping mechanism was just to read and watch TV and go on Netflix. And for almost a year, I was not productive. Sure, I was teaching because I was still, teaching at UP Visayas at the time. But and we released our film A House in Pieces for a world premiere. Unfortunately, online and European premiere, and it was like Gail said, it's a different experience. I would have wanted to be around people, talk about it. But that's how it is last year. We had online different screenings online organized by NGOs like GIZ who wanted to still go on talking about peace and violent extremism in Mindanao. But that was just it. So I was just happy about winning some awards, but then I was more anxious about the pandemic. But then on the start of the year, I just decided that, okay, it's time to go back to Mindanao. So I left Iloilo, went back to Davao, and told myself that I need to do something because creating is part of my coping mechanism. I'm a storyteller. So what I did was to apply to artist residencies online and just started, going on creating work. And just kept rolling this year. So I feel like I got my mojo back. I got into the Scottish Documentary Institute. I got an NCCA Cinema Quarantine grant. I have commissioned projects for art exhibitions. One is in the UP Vargas Museum now. And then I have another project with One World Media. And we have started filming. We have already I have already finished filming just recently, like a week ago, a ritual of affliction for the NCCA Cinema Quarantine Grant. It's an essay film inspired by Victor Turner's concept of liminality. Turner said that there are different phases of rituals, and one of them is a ritual of affliction that usually happens during an outbreak, and I'm connecting it with the 15th century death mask, Mindanao's war during that time. So in the filming, health protocols were very important for me. So we made sure that they were followed. But one challenge here in Mindanao is that, there are so many, I'm sure the others also can agree with this, is that, different QR codes, rules and processes to get for every LGU. And in Mindanao, since it's landlocked, you have to go through several LGUs to get to your destination. So I'm pretty sure we're going to have the same problem when I start shooting in Lake Cebu. It's a docu about a Tiboli woman who's been red tagged just recently, and within the pandemic, that's also always like a concern for me, that despite the pandemic, the government is still so obsessed with its anti-insurgency programs. So lastly, I know I've been talking a lot. So lastly, I'll talk about the trajectories of regional filmmaking in the country. I'll just focus on Mindanao and some parts of Iloilo, since I've stayed there for 3 years. For Mindanao, it's very complicated topic. There's a lot of views about it, especially among filmmakers, because they belong to different communities and different sensibilities. Mindanao and Iloilo are very different in my observation as well, because somehow Mindanao has already created their footing, while Iloilo hasn't. They're still trying to find their identity. And I've talked to some filmmakers there, and they're currently creating their own, really organized. I think that was the problem. They were saying that they're not very organized. So they're doing that. For Mindanao, we're somehow more organized. And then this is not a plug, but I will just say that if you're interested, if you're a scholar or just interested in Mindanao, J. Jomar F. Quintos just came out with a book, The Invisibility of the Visible, Emancipated Mindanao and Sulu in Philippine Cinema. So this is a really good update on Mindanao cinema, because it's a really good book, because no one has ever written about Mindanao and Sulu cinema in the country, as far as I know. And also, Mindanao filmmakers are trying to go beyond the usual themes of conflict stories. So there is what you call the Milmig Film Festival that tries to explore speculative narratives. They're also trying to tell stories about everyday lives that are not really quite different from other stories outside of Mindanao, but are also culturally specific. There are more stories about the Lumad struggle, but there's still an ongoing issue about the center and periphery. And I guess this has been highlighted during the 2016 campaign, and during now, all these, and it's rightfully so, because for a long time, regional filmmakers feel that they are still excluded, marginalized, and so on. And it's all this language issue. But I think, for me, my position is that it's also good to study how we traverse the center and periphery, and kind of in that action of traversing, you are already moving the centers and the periphery and changing the politics of the spaces. Some some filmmakers lastly insist that what makes Mindanao a Mindanao film is the milieu and the specific cultural mappings and codes and symbols. That has yet to be studied, and I think I'm really looking forward to film scholars who can answer this question. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for listening to my really long presentation.
Maraming salamat, Claire. Maraming salamat. I think one of the ideas that you've shared that really caught my attention is that you're very particular with alternative storytelling. And I think it's crucial, most especially if, regardless whether your work is personal or it's about the specific community, is that mas nakikater, di ba, yung alternative narratives or alternative way of telling your story through the film because you're talking about trauma. And hindi siya kayang langkapin ng singular, yung na-mention mo na singular na kind ng storytelling. And I think that that says a lot about the kind of attention and ethics when it comes to filmmaking, especially if we're talking about other people's narratives. And yun nga, mas lalo na if we're talking about these atrocities and yung experiences na pwedeng hindi kayang i-narrate ng film itself. So that's one thing na na-highlight dun sa discussion mo, whether that's a personal, since you told me stories about your background and with the works, with the current works that you are doing. So ayun, I'll just ask, i-open ko na yung floor for discussion since I think ang isa ring, based from what everyone shared, it becomes crucial to acknowledge that we cannot generalize the pandemic experience. Na ito yung sinasabi nung mainstream na media, ito yung experience ng city. Yet, iba-iba tayo ng experiences from the regions. Halimbawa, yung kay Hubert na itong mga tao na to walang mask. Diba? And ikaw yung mag-a-adjust. Ikaw yung nag-shoot doon sa lugar nila. And then, with Gail's experiences na they have to undergo all these protocols kasi nag-shoot sila. But then, by the end of the day, it's not the same experience. We have different backgrounds as well. We have different filmmaking practices. And it's not just right to claim a very general and impose on this very general approach with the pandemic. So I'm opening the floor for the questions from our audience. Feel free to type your questions sa chat box based on what you've heard from this very generous speakers. Salamat ulit. Guys, questions? Questions for everyone. I'm curious, how do you reconcile your diba, yung grant giving bodies, yung funding with your projects, and then how do you go about, how do you manage diba, more or less institutional yung nagfa-fund ng projects natin, and then with the nature of your works, do you make compromises when it comes to this bureaucracies? Especially if we're speaking from a marginalized point of view. Anyone?
Ako na.
Gail?
Nauna kasi budget. Yung mga grant-giving bodies naman, aware sila na nag-increase talaga yung costs. because of the pandemic. So actually, yung funds then have increased. So I mean, the fund for yung budget namin for the animation, I don't want to say, but it's really high. Pre-pandemic, makagawa na siguro ako ng 4 na short film. Ganon siya. So it's just a matter of being transparent talaga and asking for it na hindi talaga kaya sa budget. Ganito talaga yung cost. In terms of Q Cinema din, yung budget din nila tumaas 350 for a short film. Before, sa time ko with Babylon, yun, 100,000 lang ata or 50,000, I think. Nakalimutan ko na. Pero, so yeah, they've acknowledged din naman the increase. So, it was just a matter of, they just asked na, okay, so kaya ba? Kaya ba with the 350 to make a short film? So, syempre, ikaw na nag-a-apply for them, sabihin mo na, kaya. But yun nga, with all the delays and the cost of the delays, we had to do the pledging to recuperate the loss. The loss. So, yeah. So I think the point lang is not start a production na, kulang-kulang yung budget. Parang wag na lang. Magsasuffer tayong lahat.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Kasi definitely iba na yung process eh. Hindi mo pwedeng, hindi i-account yung ganito, yung bayad sa test kits and all, transport, traveling.
Mahal magpa-swab test. Oh my God.
True. And you have to do it regularly. Others? Hubert? Claire?
Ayun. Tungkol sa ano yung question? Sorry, tungkol sa budget?
Yeah.
I don't know. Ay, yung case ko kasi lang ako as in dalawa lang kami nag-shoot, so parang, ayun. So parang more on personal budget. Tapos, recently, nag-apply ako sa NCCA, yung ECQ nila, Sir Roland, sa NCCA. So parang nakakuha ko ng grant. So yun, makapag-produce ako kasi may seed money dun. So, yung ginawa ko. Yun yung gagawin pala namin. Ayun.
Okay.
Ayun. So, yung process ko din kasi ng paggawa, kung ano lang yung available na material, location, tsaka mga tao, tsaka artista, doon ako gumagawa ng story sa sobra siya nakakatipid. So parang yun din yung creative side ng wala kang budget. So parang masyado kang nag-iisip, kaya nga pag gumagawa ka, sobrang masyado kang creative na talagang pwede kang magsinungaling para sa art. Parang gano'n, parang, di ba, kailangan mo kumausap ng tao parang matapos mo yung project. So yun yung ginagawa ko dito. So pag may nakita akong magandang kubo sa kaligitna ng palayan, gawa ako ng story about it. So parang sobrang laki na pipipid ko. And then kung may mga resources like yung mga APA na mga okay sila kausap, itetest mo sila kung magaling talaga sila sa casting, pwede sila. So yun ang ginagawa ko. So parang sobrang baba lang. Kasi ginagawa ko kasi ako na lahat. So ako na yung driver, ako nagpapakain. So ako nag-edit, ako nag-shoot. So ako na yung focus puller. So ako lahat. So sobrang tipid yung nagagawa kong ngayon. Yung process ko. Ayun.
Okay.
Kung
Claire, would you add something to that before you proceed to the next question?
Yeah, same kay Hubert. Like for 1,000 pieces, we were just a two-man crew. So I did the sound, I did shoot, I shot minimal, and then now it's just 3 people. So I'm used to working with a very small team because I've never done a long form narrative film, so it's probably a different thing with different like sections. So yeah, then when you're about your questions with grant institutions, I think like for me, what's important for me is really like, you can negotiate your ideas about that, but I guess in my opinion, I just want to know what their vision is or where they're coming from. Like I feel like there are things that I don't want to compromise.
Okay. There's a next question from Sir Roland. The pandemic, based on the Philippine government's response, is going to be a long haul. How does this hit you as filmmakers? Are you going to continue despite this condition we all share with other workers and citizens in the country? So, yeah, how do we go about these things? You, based from your experiences, I think all of you have shot pre-pandemic, and then with this ongoing crisis, how do we go about this? Ang interesting ng question is Sir Roland. Are you going to continue despite this condition? Claire?
Yeah, I'll start. Because I have been thinking about this too, because it's really difficult to be working under these conditions, and considering that we're going into the elections season, it's going to be more chaotic, right? Like everything is like so, going on at the same time, and we have the pandemic. So then again, for me, because I'm right now in Mindanao, I can't think about stopping because there are so many stories considering that. But I'll go circle back to your what you said about alternative storytelling. I also do interactive documentaries online, so I've discovered so many ways to tell stories that you can do without having to go out. So and I'm trying to also implement this by doing, like, for instance, participatory communication stories. Like, you just gather stories from different, so there are other ways to tell stories that I think I can explore, and I don't have to go out. But then, of course, this also goes back to, like, how much energy can you take out of you, having all these realities that you have to face. And it's not like it's going to end soon, and it's already, for me, it's already affecting my mental health. For instance, to be constantly inside the house and doing everything online, and constantly, like, being on the grid, so I guess it's a matter, for me, it's a matter of also, like, balancing my life and my artistic life and my personal life and my concern for other people. But lastly, I wish we can find someone who can come up with a really good pandemic response for our country. Thank you.
Yes. And I think Ma'am Kay's question is also in line with Sir Roland's question. What keeps you motivated to continue producing and shooting films despite all these challenges that you've discussed, diba? Na-experience niyo na siya at haggard siya, yet saan nanggagaling yung motivation, diba? Gail?
Yeah, sorry. Yung kay Sir Roland nga, ano nga yun ulit?
Despite the national situation.
So it's really hard kasi we are filmmakers, not by day job. No, we do this by freelance, by passion. And when the pandemic hit, we lost our day job. Nag-close yung studio who had we were, ano tawag doon? Retainer fee. So we depended on that retainer fee sa studios, and we constantly did work, and then while doing our films. So we lost this money. So wala, what else is left? Our films. So it's like, andun napunta lahat ng energy sa films. And then also with the Binisaya, that's why we keep making different kinds of events sa Binisaya, because yun na lang paglalagyan ng energy na as filmmakers, and also as not as filmmakers, as film educators, film motivators, paano ba?
Yeah.
Because yun nga, if walang susunod na filmmakers from Cebu or from anywhere else, parang sana ang Cebuano cinema. So parang, still keeping it alive. That's why we keep, siguro yung motivation, with doing this. Continue lang. If we stop now, kasi parang anong matitira. Yes, and most of the activities that we're doing now is continuation pa din naman sa previous years. Like, I'm developing Cangrejos. So Cangrejos is years 2019 nag-start, and we are starting financing this year, hopefully next year. So yun yung focus ko ngayon, the funding for Cangrejos. And at the side, itong mga kids namin from Archipelago. So I really find that taking care of kids, helping them, bring up their projects, bring them to life, to fruition is fulfilling naman siya. So, yun.
And what
Personally, na-affect ako personally.
Yeah, that's one thing.
I had to leave my son sa Ormoc Leyte. So, it's like,
Na throughout the process, di ba, hindi mo pwedeng ihiwala yung sarili mo. Yun naman siya ni Claire. And then, affected din yung mental health mo. And with the practical things that you're doing, like Gail, yun nga, may anak ka Gail, and di ba, you have all these considerations throughout the process. So that's one thing.
2020, doon ako yun yung mental things ko. Nag-adapt na naman ako. 2021 na, hindi na pwedeng na pwede. So, yun.
Yeah. Hubert?
Ano yun? May sarili kasi yung mundo. So parang, parang kasi sa akin, parang hobby na lang sa akin yung gumawa ng pelikula. Kasi nag-start ako sa commercial dati ng way back 2006. Tapos hanggang 2012, ganun. Nag-start ako yung una naggawa ng SM videos. Tapos, as in, nag-ipon muna ako na nag-ipon. So parang nakaipon ako. After that, ginawa ko yung gusto ko. So parang ngayon, parang grateful ako kasi yung mga na-sustain ako ng mga clients sa mga NGO, ganun. So parang nag-animate na din ako. So parang lahat talang ginagawa ko. So parang, ayun. So parang yun yung nagdaan sa akin, nag-sustain sa akin financially. So parang may mga clients pa rin ako ng mga NGOs. So parang, tapos binigyan ko ng sarili ko ng time na parang mag-aral talaga ako. Kasi para kaya mo naman gawin mag-isa. So parang ngayon nga gumagawa ako ng full length with Richard Kwan. So kami dalawa lang yung nag-shoot. So parang ang ganda-ganda kasi parang karamihan na nag-shoot ngayon nasa province. Kami mag-shoot kami sa city. Babalik pa rin ko kasi parang sobrang lahat yung idea nasa barrio na lang nag-shoot. Ganun. So parang ako yung sinushoot namin more on Manila areas. Pero responsible naman kami na parang yun na hindi mahawa ng COVID. Sobrang challenging din ngayon na ganun kasi ko parang ayoko dun sa sa norm na ginagawa ngayon kasi lahat bahay ko nang shoot, dalawang characters, isang character. So parang ako babalik kami sa city. So next month parang pupunta ako ng Manila ulit to shoot ng ilang version kasi care din yung location namin. So madugo. So parang during siya ng pandemic. So nakamask yung mga tao, okay lang. Yun yung ginawa ko. Nag-take opportunity ako dun sa mask. Kasi after 20 years, hindi ka na makakapag-shoot ng crowd na maraming nakamask. So, naman may gumagawang mga TV shows, di ba, na hindi daw pandemic, pero pandemic. Diba? So parang, ang weird din ng mga nangyayari na parang sana i-shoot mo kung ano talaga yung nangyayari. Kasi parang libreng prop yun libreng location, libreng, di ba? So yun ang ginagawa ko ngayon. So, parang ginagawa ko lang siyang hobby.
Pwede ba birthday na niya?
Ayan.
Okay, sorry for we'll proceed to the last question because of time constraints. So given the current restrictions of this pandemic, which of this do you think will become industry norms even after the pandemic status of COVID-19 is lifted by the World Health Organization? So this is a question from Sir Gerard. So definitely may magbabago, diba? And which do you think will become norms? Most especially in the context of regional filmmaking, I think you're the right people to ask.
Yung comment ko lang dun, yung pandemic kasi nandiyan na yung COVID, para lang siyang sipon, di ba? Nandiyan na siya, accept na natin siya. So parang tayo dapat magpaka-healthy na lang tayo, yun talaga, di ba? Feeling ko nga nagka-COVID na ako, pero parang hindi siya nag-anong symptoms. So parang, yun, responsible ako mag-take ng vitamins. Every day, nagpa-vaccine ako. So parang, alam ko yung COVID nandiyan na siya. So parang, ayun, may mga responsibility din tayo, di ba? Ayun.
Yes. Gail, Claire?
Wow, that's a very interesting and difficult question. I think tama naman yung sinabi ni Gilbert that you have to take care of yourself and so on. But, with me, I've lost many close friends this year and last year. So the pandemic has really taken a toll on me. really, and it's still ongoing. So sometimes people forget that it's still ongoing. I'm talking about my context, like in Davao, but of course in Davao, it's people follow because they're scared of the mayor. So, so that's another thing, you know, like so we are constantly wearing masks and so on. So that's not a problem. But I think talking about innovation, while it's true that you feel like okay, it's you miss the cinema experience, but I think now what's interesting is that film viewing and distribution has been more democratized in that sense.
Mm.
You have, I mean, as a filmmaker, and I'm also a teacher. Like it's so easy now to be teaching world cinema, like, or, like I teach world cinema, I teach film theory, and because everything, there's access because things are being shown online. And so young people can get access to them, like for instance, 1,000 cuts. Normally, it would be very expensive to screen them when it was not the pandemic, but now you could access that, or the Kingmaker, all these very important documentaries now, and then you could also have access to international film festivals. So I think, like, talking to other distribution only in my field, in documentary, they think that there will be a lot of innovations. And I think, like, for instance, for interactive documentary, it is gaining so much ground now because people are interested in looking at stories online and how innovative are stories being told interactively online. Augmented reality, like TikTok. So I just finished a workshop on augmented and virtual reality storytelling and finished one piece. And I realized that, oh wow, I can actually tell a story using Instagram or TikTok, or use all these augmented reality software that's actually very within our fingertip. So those are innovations that I think, of course, these platforms will evolve and they're not fixed. Like, but there are some that will stay during this time. And I cannot talk much about distribution because I'm not a producer. But then just talking to some distributors, mostly, they say like this will change. It will change so much through the years, and it has started changing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Gail, last,
Yeah, for sure, yung distribution, what we're doing now online, I feel like it's something that will stay. It's very convenient. Yun nga sabi ni Claire. But in terms of production, I think just that people are prioritizing safety and health. Hopefully that will remain. Now, the fixed hours, di ka lalagpas sa ganitong time, or like the limited number of people. I don't know if you've seen yung mga malalaking shoot, ang daming tao, and not everyone naman is required to be in that shoot. Yung mga ganun, people control. And yun pa ba? Sasabihin pa ba ako? Yun, we can't afford naman to always have, especially sa regional, na may safety officer, no? But I think it's a good practice na may knowledge tayo, at least basic knowledge on the safety protocols, things. And yung vaccine. Hopefully we're all vaccinated. Yun.
Okay. Maraming salamat. Kung may tanong pa po kayo, we'll cater that dun sa latter part ng program. Maraming salamat, Gail, Hubert, Claire, for that very insightful discussion. As in, sobrang thank you sa pagpapaunlak. At yung next part po ng forum natin, let's hear from the chair of the NCCA Cinema Committee, Sir Roland Tolentino. Okay. Roland Tolentino is faculty of University of the Philippines Film Institute and former dean of the UP College of Mass Communication. He has taught at the Osaka University, National University of Singapore, and University of California, Berkeley. His research interests include Philippine literature, popular culture, cinema and media, interfacing national and transnational issues. He writes fiction and creative nonfiction, and is a fellow and former director of the Likhaan UP Institute of Creative Writing. He is the chair of the National Committee on Cinema and commissioner for the Subcommission on the Arts of the National Committee for Culture and the Arts, and is board member of the Film Development Council of the Philippines. He is a member of the Manunuri ng Pelikulang Pilipino, Filipino Film Critics Group, Congress of Teachers and Educators for Nationalism and Democracy, Content UP, and Altermedia, People's Alternative Media Network. Sir Roland, I'm giving you the floor for the next part of our forum.
Thank you sa yung three forum or conversation for the invitation. I'm happy na I follow the discussion of the first panel kasi I will take a bleaker picture of regional cinemas and filmmakers in this time of the pandemic, which is going to be, for me, a long haul. No? By all indicators, we are seeing, and things have not been changing much, and with the elections coming in for next year. No? I prepared a presentation for today based on the topic that's been assigned. Paglikha ng pelikula mula sa mga rehiyon sa panahon ng pandemya. The outline is kind of general. No? The film industry during the pandemic lockdown. We cannot think of regional cinemas at this time without understanding what the rubric of all these health protocols for the film workers are at stake or are in place. No? So we're still following a kind of pattern which I will reflect on later. No? Wherein there's a kind of synergy that has to happen between the idea of the film industry, indie cinema, and regional cinemas. No? I will also discuss context for the production of and the production of online content during the lockdown. So it's no longer movies in cinema houses, but it's another kind of movie experience that's coming to us. No? And 24/7, our availability ng mga movies, etc. No? And which it makes it more difficult to look for a lot of regional films. No? The place of regional cinemas in the pre-pandemic, where it was some before 2 years ago, no? And producing regional cinemas during the pandemic. And the body of works, the very small, thin body of works that were produced during the pandemic. And lastly, the concerns for regional cinema filmmakers during and after the pandemic. Sorry. So the film industry in the pandemic, it has already suffered 16 billion losses from the start of the lockdown last March 2020 until April 2021. No? In a matter of 14 months or 15 months. No? So malaki ang epekto nung lockdown kasi it deemed the film industry, the arts as non-essentials, and therefore only the essential work lines will need to be prioritized dito sa lockdown. Tandaan natin, our lockdown experience in the Philippines is quite different, and we suffered the double burden of not only experiencing the virus, the pandemic, no? But we suffer the consequences also of having a failed government in the management of the health emergency. While all others are already shooting, even South Korea has moved out of the bubble kind of shoots and productions, no? The regular shoots na sila. Or even the US, no? Na ganung klase, with health protocols, of course, no? The Philippines remains laggard dito, and it's all our government's kind of mismanagement of the health emergency. Lahat ng schools nagbukas na, face-to-face na, maliban natatanging Pilipinas, nating mahal. So mabigat yun sa atin. So hindi lang siya simple, pero yung implementation of the lockdown at yung na klase. And probably the burden, as we've heard from Gail, Hubert, and Claire, no, is disparate. No? The burden is always disparate. Na nagko-complain na nga ang legal films at major studios about the cost of the health protocols. Ano pa ang fun ng indie filmmakers with smaller budgets, no? And safetying the health protocols. No? So the Metro Manila Film Festival, when it was done last year, basically streaming, from $1 billion it earned in 2019, which is the biggest film draw for the local film industry. No? It nearly earned 25 million through online streaming in 2020. The FDCP and IGA health protocols are very stringent. It does not acknowledge yung conditions ba na probinsya ito, mas konti ang insidente ng virus infection compared sa Metro Manila or the others na nasa MECQ status, no? So pare-pareho ang protocols, which means very stringent, no matter ang reality naman at the ground level is kind of different. No? At bagamat mas may opening ang IGA, FDCP is the one endorsed by the Department of Health and the IATF. So ang complaint ng Regal Films, I forget yung anak na Lily Monteverde, is that 30% of production cost goes for the maintenance, the insurance of the health protocols, which means kung budget mo dati to make the regular film ay 50 million, now you need 20 million klase ng budget. So may sufferance ngayon on 300,000 industry workers because the film industry is not in full force. No? It's not in full production. Lahat ay wait and see or lahat ay tinitingnan. Gagawa ka ng pelikula mo, hindi naman kayang i-pick up ng Netflix, so etc. So saan mo ilalagay? Lalo na kung studios ka, no? Na klase. No? So yung iba, nag-develop ng sariling platforms like VivaNet. Viva, I think net nga yung tawag sa platform ng Viva Films. No? And then it also went by way of online festivals. No? Ibig sabihin yung PPP was conceived as a paid online festival. No? Pero yung mga regular festivals naman, katulad ng Japan, European, the usual festivals na nagkatuloy, even Cinema Rion, online ang platform. No? So streaming platforms or even free streaming platforms becomes the source of film revenues. No? But not for all. It's not across the board. No? It's mainly for mainstream kind of content. So what were the film content that were developed appropriately by larger media outfits or even film companies? No? So nakakatch up yung Pinoy sa production ng BL series or Boys Love series. No? 88 series were produced in 2020 with Hello Stranger, one of the boys series na in the lead, with 2.4 to 2.8 million per episode. So they were able to monetize itong pa na to, no? Itong klase ng views na to through the overwhelming presence of viewers partaking of the BL series. It's a global phenomenon. Ang kakatuwa sa BL series natin ay lahat nasa pandemic lockdown. For obvious reasons. No? While others nga are being able to mobilize na yung katulad ng South Korea or Taiwan, gumagawa sila ng BL series na walang pandemic pa. Na parang walang pandemic sa situations na tayo, may recognition ng pandemic. So mas demure kasi walang kissing scene. Kasi nga pandemic at nagkikita lang ang classmates magpo-fall in love online. And then the comeback of the heterosexual bold films in pay sites, katulad ng Viva Netflix. No? So variations of the bold film. Yung regular bold films katulad ng Taya, or comedy bold films katulad ng Stupid Love, or horror bold films katulad ng Kulay ng Dilim. No? May mga class and gender implications ito main content na pinuduce ng film studios natin. For the BL series, it's really a representation of a middle-class kind of gayhood in time of the lockdown. Kasi wala silang problema sa pagkain, sa laundry nila, they are able to give each other with items na in order sa Lazada or sa iba pang lines, etc. No? So walang problema ito kundi pang mag-aral, magaganda ang computers nila, etc. So may mga ganung nakatira sila sa condos for most part, etc. So pagtapos ang division of roles dito, yung mga fall in love ka, meron ka mas masculine, mas aggressive or mas confident na lalaki at isang feminine at demure na lalaking bading. So ganito parati yung peg, parati physically more masculine at yung isa ay more feminine ang attributes. No? So no kissing due to the pandemic lockdown. So ang gender implications ito ay straight identifying actors doing gay roles. No? Which means that nadidefeat din yung purpose of you articulating another kind of sexuality and gender experience through coming out stories. No? Dahil it's after all straight actors ito, which is also the peg of an early gay kind of cinema na lumabas na bold film na mga actors na nagpo-portray nito ay puro mga straight na lalaki. Jake Cuenca, lahat ng gusto mag-portray ay nag-portray ng gay roles. No? So what is privilege is a very middle class na klase ng gayhood. Walang problema sa mundo. At for most part, sila lang ang nagpo-problema sa coming out nila. Tanggap naman pala sila ng pamilya nila, tanggap sila ng friends nila, so wala mang persecution. And of course, the peg dito, para mag-come out ka ng ganitong kadali, kailangan good looking ka at of a certain kind of physical type. So unafraid then to come out. So it's a very painless kind of coming out, which is not the experience for most people in this kind of situation, and which is also not realizable for a lot of single gays. At hindi ako bitter dito during the pandemic situation. Na makakapag-develop ka ng serious relationship, serious first relationship mo dito sa ganitong klaseng lockdown situation. So it's very middle class kind of perspective at very heteronormative pa rin ang relations dito, that one has to take on the masculine role and one has to take on the feminine role in the relationship, the gay relationship. So doon naman sa bold films na naglabasan ngayon, nagpo-proliferate sa different na klase, it's really, natungayan na natin na namatay na sila yung bold films na Pinoy. No? Kasi as early as 2012 yata or 2008, ay binana ni Henry C. ang R18 films sa kanyang movie theaters, which is around 70, 80, or hindi ko nagkamali, 70% of the total cinema houses in the country. So pag binan ka ng largest one, ay malulugi ka. Hindi ka maipapalabas. No? So yun yung one. So namatay yung sex-oriented films na heterosexual kind. Dahil yun naman ang start niya since the 1970s na lumabas ang first generation of bomba films. And nag-proliferate na heterosexual kind of sex-oriented media text ay yung mga afternoon telenovelas mo of all times, di ba? Na querida story. So love triangulation parati. Lumabas sa hapon, sa lahat sa two major channels mo ay puro querida story ang kineri. Yung gay-oriented sex films mo na sila lang yung nag-sustain itong bold film genre na ito ay nagpatuloy naman talaga even prior to the pandemic through third-run movie houses. Dati nasa MTRCB ako at may mga nagpapa-rate talaga ng pelikula intended for third-run movie houses. No? Sa Cubao, sa Davao, sa CDO, may mga third-run movie houses that specializes in gay films. At bago ito mga gay films na to, at more or less, ang dami pa rin lumalabas even in the pre-pandemic. At of course, yung gay films na lumabas sa panahon na indie cinema na marami, no? Etc. Pagtapos ay dito naman sa mga lumabas na ngayon na nag-resurrect na bold films ay nagpapatuloy pa rin. Kung makikita natin ulit yung posters, babalikan natin, isa lang ang lalaki at multiples ng babae sa background niya. So it's really a male as source of sexual power. Siya magko-call ng shots at ang women niya, marasan daw ako ng pretty sexy women, ay accessories. So it's privileging again the experience of the dogma of heteronormativity. Ibig sabihin, para magkaroon ka ng a kind of sexual relationship of a pleasurable kind, ay kailangan ito ay babae at lalaki lamang. At sa relationship na ito, lalaki ang nag-hold much of the power. So I'd like to go on to another kind of development in terms of the swing to online media streaming na ginagawa natin, especially in the era of the Philippine lockdown pandemic. No? Yung online becomes our only portal to our usual friends dati, our workmates, news about what's happening in the country. So ang laki ng reliance natin sa online. And it's not kind of different from a worldwide phenomenon na klase, no? At ang tinawag na nga dito ay yung tethering, which means itinatali. It's a word that describes yung condition ng pagtali sa mga hayop para hindi makakilos. Which is also kaya related now. It's now to characterize itong ginagawa natin na we spend hours and hours sa ating gadgets lang and going online na klase. Which means katulad ng mga hayop na tinatali ay wala kang ganong panorama na nakikita. Nuubos mo yung oras mo sa napakaliit na lugar, which is really also the point of all these social media experiences we have. Bumuti ba tayong tao after hours and hours devoted to the social media? Hindi naman, di ba? So, a lot of things are going to go through yung online. Our knowledge about the pandemic, our knowledge about the vaccine, our knowledge about the elections are going to go through the online portal. No? The internet penetration has increased over this year steadily, no? From 64.17 in 2017, it's now 74.22. And there are 79.7 million users last year. At ang nito, very serious na hindi mga elementary students for most part. They are 16 years old and above, which means it's really a potent market also for a lot of pay-per-view na mga media text. No? And most of the use of the internet access through cell phones, no? 73%. So what we have is now is a growing population of internet users that are young, middle class, para maka-afford ka ng data for internet use, articulate people, but easily swayed by SOCMED trends. As you know, kung may Facebook kayo or may Twitter kayo, ang lalabas dyan na top 25 posts ay magagaling sa 25 friends nyo lang. Or 25 people that have reacted to your work, to your post favorably. So it's really kind of preaching to the same crowd. No? There's also a big reliance on fake news and influencers. No? Na klase, ibig sabihin, basta sinabi niyo ito or na-interest ka dito, totoo na ito. So yun yung kino-confront natin. It's a very kind of uncritical use of SOCMEDs. No? So FB becomes the main source of reading the news. On the one hand, Filipinos spend 10 hours, 56 minutes online every day. No? Samantala, ang global average mo is 6 hours, 54 minutes. So ibig sabihin, may top up tayo ng 4 more hours into online. So ano na ibig sabihin, kahit na ganito, nag-online pa rin, naka-online nga tayo at may ginagawa pa rin tayo sa iba nating gadgets probably, no? Para magkaroon ng ganyang klase effect. No? Filipinos, on the other hand, spend 4 hours, 15 minutes, no, on social media every day. Dahil nga ito nga yung main source of news na natin versus the global average of about half. No? Half by 2 hours, more than half lang. 2 hours, 25 minutes lang. So it's a very important kind of development. I think things will change kahit nabuksan ng sinihan na klase. No? This is really going to be an entry point into our future film-going experience na video on demand na klase. Ang hindi natin nakakaligtaan natin, individuals now are also content providers. Ibig sabihin, by way of a post, picture, or video shared on in various social media platforms, nagiging filmmakers din sila of certain kind because their accounts are a kind of personal archives that involve curation of photos, images, posts, and shared content. No? Ang hindi natin alam, dahil masyado din tayo maraming oras, masyado tayo maraming sineshare, kahit naman wala nagaganap sa buhay natin sa panahon ng lockdown, this is being mined for data. At pag minine ito for data, the more we share, the more we like, the more we're active, mas maraming data na imamine. Bakit mo nilike ito, and then likely merong keywords dito na pwedeng i-mine na para makatugon yung big businesses kung ano kailangan lang i-roll out sa various phases of the pandemic. No? And then ads come in sa mga various things na nilike natin that went viral. No? Papasok automatically ang ads dito. So as this becomes a source of supplement income. So it's also the transformation of Facebook and Instagram for online selling. Dami ko na order dito sa panahon ng lockdown kasi ang daming services na hindi mo otherwise ma-access, no? Na klase. Twitter has 9 million Filipino users, the 12th largest in the world. Tandaan natin, sabi ng isa kong estudyante, ang Facebook ay pangmatanda. So ibig sabihin, nasa Twitter sila lahat dahil hindi nila kasama yung mga magulang nila or ang teachers nila sa Twitter. So mas active sila doon. And Twitter has also developed into a kind of alter accounts. No? Ibig sabihin, pwedeng from a couple of seconds of video na about sexual, kuha lang sa cellphones, masturbation, or sex scenes ng both gay and straight kinds, heterosexual kinds, then you need to top up. Magpadala ka ng GCash if you want to see the full video na klase. No? So yun yung nag-develop din sa Twitter, especially in the time of the pandemic lockdown, na maraming time ang mga tao at walang access to work. So TikTok has around 3.6 million Filipino users. And these are very active users, mind you. Kasi ang number one video for last month ay nag-reach ng 15.8 million views. No? At walang pelikula na nakakaganyan. Yung BL series per episode ay nasa 2.8 lang at best. No? So, yan yung number one slot last month. No? Whoever is Niana Guerrero has the number one slot. At sa top 100, meron pa siyang 16 other videos sa TikTok. So meron na siyang 27 million followers, which means she is already at the level of influencer, which means she is already at the level of being paid for the kinds of videos that she does because it creates a lot of traffic for the platform. This traffic na kinikreate natin sa platform translates to mega income for the online corporations in 2020 alone. So Google, of course, ang dami ng searches natin dyan at ginawa, ay $181 billion no? In 2020 alone. No? Facebook, 29.1 billion. Netflix, na lahat tayo nag-subscribe or napilitan dahil wala tayong gagawin, 25 billion. Instagram, mas malaki pa ang kita kaysa sa Twitter, no? 24 billion. YouTube, may Prime na, ay 19.7 billion. Twitter has 3.7 billion and TikTok has 1.9 billion. Ang pinaka-phenomenal though dito yung TikTok, which was developed since 2017 to be earning this kind of mega bucks. No? At it's not going to, and I foresee tatagal pa ito kasi nga of the lockdown situation. Now, what happened to our regional cinemas? No? Sporadic naman talaga ang regional cinemas natin, development natin. It's only Cebu, for most part, that has had an industry kind of regional cinema. And it all started dahil sila din ang nauna. By 1938, you already had the first Visayan film. And a person, Virgilio Gonzalez, acknowledged as a father of Visayan cinema. Ilocano cinema would attempt to go next with Carayo. First Ilocano film shot in Hawaii, na sa maraming Ilocanos, di ba? Migrant workers of the first generation. And then, yung first Hiligay Noon film mo was belated. So, tatlo lang talaga na buong regional cinemas nito. Ginauhaw ako, ginagutom ako in 1977. But as an industry, ibig sabihin, may filmmaking ka, may sinihan ka, may following ka, nakakapagtrabaho on a regular basis yung mga tao mo. it was only Cebuano cinema since the short period of the 1960s to hanggang 1972 na mag-martial law. And it's also because of the crossover of Gloria Sevilla and iba pang Cebuano stars going mainstream, no? And nag-sustain dito. So, yung rise of digital cinemas from 2005 is a kind of accessory to the rise of indie films in general, which all happened through Cinemalaya. So digital technology becomes the impetus of the rise of indie and later on regional cinemas. No? Filmmaking in the regions are strong in Kapampangan, in the languages of Kapampangan, Bicolano, Ilocano, Cebuano, Hiligaynon, but more especially strong in Mindanao, the Mindanaoan cinema na klase, no? And then Mindanaoan too has all the largest networks of film festivals, no? Siyam daw at nabanggit pa si Claire ng isa pa na very specific sa isang format. No? And then ang ginawa din, nakatulong din ang regional cinemas to be able to develop other kinds of sectoral cinemas na hindi ka na-develop nung panahon ng mainstream cinema lang, ng industry lang. So you had LUMAD, indigenous and overseas Filipino workers na mas na-sustain dito sa indie cinema and regional cinemas. Mas lalo naging cohesive ang women mo. Dati ay isa lang naman talaga, si Marilu Diaz-Abaya lang naman, would lay claim to the title of producing women's films. Ngayon, meron ka ng body of filmmakers and body of women's work. No? Hindi rin nagawa ito ng mainstream yung LGBTQIA+. Ngayon nagawa ito in the cinema. No? Filipino diasporic cinema. So we have also got to know that it is also the golden age. It's not only the golden age of indie cinema or regional cinemas, but it's also the golden age of the documentaries. No? More than ever, ito yung pinakamaningning na period ng documentaries and the short films. No? So regional cinemas, ang contribution niya, it has expanded the notion of Philippine national cinema na hindi nagawa prior to its existence. No? So you would have, for example, Brillante Mendoza asking mainstream stars, Sherry Hill, to speak in Kapampangan na kung Kapampangan ka, magti-cringe ka kasi mali-mali yung accent. But now you have actors coming from the regions, no? Technicians coming from the regions and doing yung mga markers, what would be characterized as Mindanaoan cinema or Cebuano cinema, Binisaya cinema, etc. So it has contributed to the defining of not just a regional kind of identity, heritage, and culture, but the concept of the region being part of the national identity, heritage, and culture. So yun yung nagawa niya prior to the pandemic ng 2020. Pero ano ba naganap din? Hindi naman ibig sabihin ay problemless ang Philippine film industry. Una din, ang Philippine film industry ay minority sa box office draw. Hollywood primarily or yung mga foreign films dominate sa box office income locally with claiming 70 to 75% of the income. No? Yung mainstream studio mo, yung dati, yung Star, at yung Regal at Viva, 80% ng remaining 20 to 25% ang pinaghahatian nila, 80% nun. It's also very regularized itong industry na to, yung operations niya, because the offices of the FDCP and IMTRCB are directly under the office of the President. So meron silang eyes and ears kagad ng presidente kasi parang of all the arts, of all the industry, ito lang ang hawak ng nasa ilalim ng opisina ng presidente. At ang genre of choice bago mag-pandemic ay romance films. Lahat ng variations na kung sino ma-prepare of na mga couples dito at may ma-match. No? So indie cinema is simply a small minority of the Philippine cinema terrain. No? At mabibilang mo nga sa 10 daliri mo nag-crossover na indie film at napalabas sa Cinemaplex na klase, no? At quite successful. Ibig sabihin sa around 800 films na developed sa period na to na indie cinema ay mga 10 lang ang kumita. Pero kahit na 10 lang, it's also the clear critical mass of indie body of works that have interrogated the idea of the nation and national cinema. So at this time, katulad naman ng anything, regional cinemas is considered as minority ng indie cinema. So minority ang Philippine cinema, ang Philippine industry, film industry sa world cinema or sa local income ng box office draw, minority ang indie cinema dito sa film industry at mas minority ang regional cinemas sa rubric na ito. So the place of regional cinemas, no? Minority na nga ito sa grants, no? Kahit mas marami ang nire-represent itong areas, ay token for most part. Isa o dalawa sa 6 or 8 ang ibibigay sa regions. No? Ganun din for exhibitions. No? Ang PEG naman talaga na nagpondo, nag-spur din ng interest to develop regional cinemas ay the usual grant and film exhibition indie film festivals. No? Which means that yung very cottage industry na bibigyan ka ng seed money and deliver the film for exhibition in 6 months. At best. No? So parang mo-order ng hot pandesal sa mga filmmakers itong model nito. Kaya hindi fully nag-develop ito into a kind of a viable industry kasi nga hindi, but for most part, hindi tinetake on ng world cinema or ng binibili para sa distribution sa ibang bahagi ng mundo. So DIY, do-it-yourself to an already do-it-yourself filmmaking practice. So kung Metro Manila, indie film na ito, mas marami itong support. No? Kumpara sa ginawa nila Gail na nag-travel sa isang isla at siya naglilinis, janitor, PA, etc. ng sarili niyang kung saan siya dapat ang bossing dahil siya yung executive producer dito, no? Na klaseng level. No? Pero mas DIY nga. DIY na artisanal na nga yung indie cinema mo to begin with. Pero pag ginawa pa ito sa regions, ginawa pa ito na U-Board na mas dalawa lang sila, mas DIY pa. So ibig sabihin, malaki yung reliance talaga na it's really a kind of self-determination, self-perseverance in the field. No? Mahal nyo lang talaga ang ginagawa nyo. Kaya ito nagpapatuloy. No? For most part, marami siguro na nasa Metro Manila na nag-give up na sa idea ng film industry at nag-prevention and to other kinds of works. No? So yung indie grants mo, na-cancel. Cinema One has been canceled dahil nasara nga yung ABS-CBN at hindi na kailangan additional content market for Cinema One. Highly reduced ang Q Cinema mo, ang Cinemalaya has been just short films at Cinepay Mila mo ay tapos na dapat ang pelikula mo bago ilabas dito bilang a kind of sigurista mode. No? So it's primarily through the FDC support that becomes the lifeline of a lot of indie filmmakers at this time. No? Pero of a certain profile. Ibig sabihin high-end film regional indie filmmakers, hindi pa yung mga regular lang or start-up. No? So yung NCCA mo, ang dami natin allotted slots for competitive grants. No? Ngayon nasa 3.2 million out of the 7 million ang walang takers. No? Dahil nga sa grabe ng strict requirements na kailangan tuparin ng filmmakers dito. So hindi kaya ito sa regions. No? So ang positive thing ay may a bit of output pa rin kahit manipis nga. So baka naman narinig nyo yung ECQ Parts, dalawang full-length film, omnibus films na nagawa dito through a grant, yung unused grant ng 2020 na hindi nga na po, walang takers. No? At hindi alam ko anong gagawin na maraming nabigyan ng grant pero paano implement online. So ito yung Eksena Cinema Quarantine na pelikula that gave out grants to 16 filmmakers from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao at NCR. And most of the NCR people also came from regions. No? So I'd just like to show you yung trailer nito to give you an idea of the kinds of images and the kinds of determination also of regional filmmakers to continue producing films, even in the initially more precarious times of the pandemic.
Video po. Sorry po, Roland.
No?
Sir, hindi po,
Video po.
hindi po siya nagpe-play. Yung PowerPoint po yung naka-display sa share
Okay, so
screen.
kailangan pala yun. Sorry, kanina pa pala ako.
Okay po.
Take two. Wala reaction shot ang mga tao.
Andito lang kami, sir.
Hindi na naman na-share ko, sorry.
Mm.
Sir, sorry, we're seeing your ano po, your desktop. Your
Right. I need to bring it out again. So yun yung efforts na ginawa namin with a unused budget na and we're replicating the effort for this year belatedly with Hubert and also filmmakers from the region, no? At Claire joining us on board for this year among others, no? It's interesting na meron ding views ang ganitong klaseng films. So, nung premiere ito ay nag-stay on for Cinema Region. Nagkaroon naman ng a bit of more reach kesa kung ang Cinema Region ay ginawa lang sa isang place like it was done in the past, no, prior to the pandemic. So mas sustainable ang reach at about 40,000 ang naging reach nito in various kinds of levels. And then yung Cinema Region also featured about 100 free works for free available for streaming, mainly coming from the regions. At marami sa mga films na ito na produced from 2019 to 2021, which is a real feat, no? Interestingly, ay gumagawa pa rin ng films ang nasa regions, albeit nasa short film mode yung mga ginagawa nila, no? So it had the thrust of the best films from the regions and also LGBTQIA films na galing din mostly from the region. So where art thou na yung regional cinemas during the pandemic? So it's really minimal nasa barely making it on a day-to-day basis kind of production work. No? Highly exceptional pa nga. It's more of an exception rather than a rule. And the output is very thin. No? More minoritized than ever itong regional filmmakers natin. And for most part, katulad ni Hubert, it's a more of a DIY kind of existence. It's really just a determination to sustain your craft or the filmmaker's craft from the regions, no? At this time. No? So regional cinemas as other of indie cinema, as other of the film industry. So regional cinemas and filmmakers are twice othered, no? Na klase. So nakapag-roll out halimbawa ng bakuna through the FDCP at dito. Pero pang Metro Manila lang. Ibig sabihin ay parang bahala na kayo kung nasa regions kayo. No? Not thinking na FDCP is a national agency out there to also kind of provide a safety net for the filmmakers. At ang filmmakers mo naman ay nationwide ang locations. No? So yung ganong klase ba na better na roll out sana. No? What are the implications? No? Ang implications nito, we are realizing now that the film industry, indie films, via yung mga grant giving at indie film exhibition bodies na ito, and regional cinemas are intertwined. No? Kasi may domino effect yan. Pag, di ba? Pag nag-sneeze ang film industry, lahat ay magka-catch ng cold, so-called, no? Na klase. Mas malakas ang epekto nito sa regional cinemas. So the growth of the regional cinemas due to kailangan natin aminin din, nag-grow ang regional cinemas also due to the growth of indie films. No? Nagkaroon din ng opening. At not just an opening, because indie filmmakers also, from the regions, also asserted their presence, their stories to be told dito sa usual platforms ng indie film grant giving and exhibition giving body. No? In order for anything to move forward dito sa industry, sa regional, sa film, indie films at sa regional cinemas, the very basic idea that movie going should be allowed. Kung hindi makakapasok ng sinihan ulit, kung hindi bubuksan ng sinihan ulit, ay hindi mare-resurrect ang film industry. At may ripple effect nga yun. Pag nabuhay ang film industry mo, mabubuhay din, magkakaroon din ng interest ulit ang grant-giving bodies na tuloy ulit yung festival sila at ganun din, mabigyan ulit ng opportunity yung regional filmmakers mo na gumawa ulit ng films. So it's a very important kind of simple decision na hindi yata nag-gets ng IATF natin. No? So the film industry needs to be revived via tax relief. Bukod dito sa pagbubukas ng sinihan talaga, indie grants, bigyan din ng tax relief ito. Need to be revived for regional cinemas to also be revived. No? Ang long-term implication talaga ay kailangan pag-isipan na rin ng regional filmmakers about a business model for regional cinemas. No? Kasi ngayon talaga malinaw na nakakawing ito sa indie film origins ito. Ibig sabihin nasa grants pa rin na nakasenter sa Metro Manila, etc. Maaaring pag-isipan siguro yung paying audience development, which means that maybe the exhibition could go by way of schools or universities wherein students can pay a kind of amount para lang ma-recover man lang yung cost dito. So, or a co-op for regional filmmakers in the various parts of the regions, no? Na klase na much business model talaga. Otherwise, ganito lang nga ang mangyayari. Doon ako nagwawakas pero may dalawa akong epilogue na medyo nakakatakot, no? Kung walang ginagawa or napaka-minimal lang sa 300,000 mong industry film workers ang na-optimize for work, no? Ano ang job prospects ngayon hanggang sa 2022? First, na capable ang indie film workers mo. First is the prevalence of fake news. May isang flinag ang Facebook at iba pa. Ito yung Twin Mark Media Enterprises, ang fake news disseminating agency na based sa Pilipinas, no? Na may 220 Facebook pages, 22 accounts, etc., 29 IG accounts, earning 400 million pesos. Itong fake news na ito, no? Kasi at nakakapagbayad sila. ng 10,000 to 250,000 for celebrities, depende sa kilala mo, at including nabayaran nila si Mocha Uson, earning about 1 million noong 2017 lang. At si Paolo Avellino na pumayag sa ganitong scheme ng 2.2 million. Kaya wag niyo na dapat kunin si Paolo Avellino for the indie cinema circuit. No? Ibig sabihin nito ay ang laki ng opening at ito isang firm lang. No? At likely maraming ganitong firms ang may tatayo. Isa lang naman ito na pinasara ng Facebook. No? At ang income dito, at least sa Twinmark, ay 13,000 lang naman for writers, artists, videographers. No? Pero all others are pointing to at least 1,000 pesos per month na income sa iba pa fake news agencies or to work for fake news. Ibig sabihin, hindi lang naman siya trolling or being part of this army, troll army for the DDS. No? At it's done mainly through click baiting advertising na tinatawag. No? So ang profit from fake news advertising, ibig sabihin dahil marami kang traffic dito sa mga sites mo, ang traffic papasukan ito ngayon dahil may lahat ng kampanya na willing to pay advertising online, ma-attract sila ng mga outfits or news na nagpo-provide ng highest number of traffic. At ito nga yung pinoprovide ng fake news agencies such as Twinmark. No? So 2.6 billion in 2021 alone. Siyempre dito lang yung medyo kind of official. Wala akong makita amounts talaga online. The next, itong Twinmarks na to, talagang ang laki yun. They were able to pay followers sa 43 million accounts, no? With 43 million accounts, no? Na klase. At ang Filipino channel nila na online may 10.4 million. Ito yung mga portals nila. Gorgeous Me, parang walang kinalaman talaga sa politics, no? 5.7 million. Ang kailangan talaga nila, sites that will attract a lot of traffic. Unhappy with 4.9 million, Text Media, 4.4 million, TNT Media, with 4.3 million followers. So ganito yung ganito lang yung news item na ginagawa nila. A lot of them fake news, no? Parang bagong aircon units sa MRT, winter na sa Pilipinas. Yun yung idea ng clickbaiting mo. So so controversial or so weird, parang tabloid na fake news naman talaga, pero click pa rin na maraming tao. And this would create traffic para nga kumita ng 400 million pesos ang fake news agency na to. And then you can also use them to sell politicians. Kaya pala naging active si Kuya Sonny Angara ay dahil meron siyang nag-subscribe siya dito sa service na ito. And then also to create any na laman, complaints about his, parang tabloid news din siya, parang dahil hindi naman tayo nakakabili ng tabloid ay makita na lang natin dito sa Facebook. Or lalaki ang nanganak ito matapos cesarean, paano ito nangyari? Pero magtataka ka, ito nga yung sinasabi natin, very low literacy level sa social media use. Matagal, nakababad, pero kung ano-ano naman ang tinutunghayan at napapaniwalang totoo. Or prayers, mga simple calls. Prayer is putting oneself in the hands of God, hindi man lang capital letter ng God, di ba? Or ganito, mga amazing creative water fountains. Ibig sabihin, anything that can spur interest to the Facebook users. No? So ito lang yung ginagawa ng mga fake news agencies na to. At papasok siya at i-endorse niya once in a while. And the second option is to work for politicians sa 2022 elections. No? Yung election ads sa GMA ay 6 months lang nung last cycle nito, nung 2016, earned 250 million more than the same period in 2015. So which means a lot of money is to be had in terms of creating content of political campaigns for politicians. ABS News increased its profit by 35%. Ito lang naman ng bago na nangyari na hindi nangyari sa past year. So sa elections sa 2022 mo would be image-based politics, digitally savvy workforce. At maraming film workers at regional film workers ang nang magagaling dito. 102 million ang kailangan ang ginamit ng mga senador on the average para makakuha ng isang slot, isa sa 12 slots for the senator. Multiply that by 12 ay maraming income to be had for the senatorial race. Kung ganun level, either na gubernatorial or barangay level, etc. And 50 billion alone if you choose to run for the presidency. So these are the only work streams that are available in this time of the pandemic. So ang plight of regional filmmakers and cinemas during and after the pandemic is really a kind of very reactive plight na hindi naman separate sa iba pang sectors na affected ng pandemic, no? Na considered non-essential. So it's reactive to IATF and LGU guidelines. Madalas hindi nag-uusap ito. So iba yung guidelines ng provincial, iba yung guidelines ng city, iba yung guidelines ng barangay. Na iba sa guidelines ng IATF na very rigid lang. At katulad ng FDCP o yung for film workers health protocols ay na i-apply mo sa buong bahagi ng bansa whether kayo ay si Hubert kind or whether kayo ay si Regal Films kind. O cookie cutter mold, all size fits all. No? So it is also reactive to the film industry to jumpstart. Hindi ganong mag-move ang conditions sa regions at regional filmmakers kung hindi ma-jumpstart yung film industry mo. At very simple jumpstarting, buksan ang sinihan. Kahit para sa mga bakunado lang, which is at this point, 20% lang ng population natin ang fully vaccinated. So it's also reactive to indie grant and festival bodies, no? Which was a major source of lifeline for production of indie filmmakers. No? Regional filmmakers. So the slump until magkakaroon ng slump sa regional filmmaking until all this are realized. Ito all three mangyari. And therefore, regional filmmakers and regional cinemas is going to be the last to recover dito sa sharing na nangyari. Maybe even skip a generation of regional filmmakers and cinema. I see it hanggang mga 2026 ito na ganito magiging condition for most part. No? Na magkaroon man lang ng what. So ang portal lang talaga is DIY sa level ng regional filmmakers. Claire doing her own thing, Hubert doing his own thing, Gail doing her own thing, no? Kanya-kanya. Which is really the mantra of the government to all of us citizens during this lockdown. Bahala na kayo, wala nang ayuda, kanya-kanya kayo. So it is really up to Claire at itong mga filmmakers that have realized their existence through regional filmmaking to keep the faith in film, art, and film culture. Ibig sabihin yung to create more of a kind of online literacy platforms so that film culture will be alive sa ginagawa nyo nila mga interns nila Gail or ng trainees nila. Kailangan natin pagtulong-tulungan ito, no? At lalo double effort sa regional filmmakers ito. And in order for this kind of film culture to persevere and triumph after the pandemic or over the pandemic. No? So yun lang at maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Roland, for that lecture. Ang dami naming napulot. We're now opening the floor for the Q&A, and just chat your questions. Type nyo lang dyan sa chat box. And while waiting for questions from our participants, sir, I have questions. You can choose to answer all of them or just some of these questions. Now, you're very much well-versed with popular culture at ang dami-dami yung essays on that. At ang ganda lang nung sinabi niyo that there is a boom with BL series during the time of pandemic. How do you think the pandemic corroborated with that boom na andyan na naman yung gay films even before, with example yung mga pelikula ni Nick de Ocampo, and more so with the boom of independent cinema. But then this BL series may ganun siyang boom ngayong pandemic. How will you connect that with our lockdown, with the current situation that we have, with that kind of boom na, di ba, yun nga, yun na-mention yun na yung Thai films, Thai na BL, andyan na sila even before the COVID. But then with our context, may ganun siyang generation ng BL na content. So how do we further explore that in the local context? Another one is how do we go about social media as a double-edged sword? na while it opens, while our increasing access to the internet, most especially with the lockdown, na it paves way for that kind of democratization with knowledge production. It's also a pool of misinformation. Yung na-mention yun na fake news, mas nag-increase siya how it's being weaponized by the people in power as tool for that kind of kung ano man yung agenda nila. We cannot deny that while it's a source of that misinformation, it also has that power to, in a way, negate that misinformation. Yung debate ngayon na yung sources ay TikTok, YouTube, at ito yung mga taong may access dito. There definitely is a power for that kind of accessibility ng social media. And then the last question is, na-mention yung how regional filmmaking is DIY. And we cannot deny that there is a burden for regional filmmakers to be representative of the regions. So do you think the discourse with our current situation, does it worsen the discourse on the kind of fetishism that we have with regional films? So yun. Para po sa mga participants, sa Q&A natin, just type your questions. Salamat po. Sir, yeah.
With regards to the first question, it's no accident, no? Kailangan kumita pa rin ng mga backers. Marami naman dito ay na-establish ng BL series online. Are also part of larger companies, media companies, so arm ng ABS-CBN pa rin dati, or ng Viva Films, etc. They also partook of this kind of market, no? Kasi hindi naman siya ganong mahal gawin, mabilis gawin, etc. At may template, may cookie cutter mold din na mga conventions ang BL series na ito. So nag-migrate lang sa ganong klaseng platform, at kaya nga, mas marami lang ang pumapasok, kaya umabot nga ng 88 dito yung platforms na yun. No? So dati naman hindi ito pinapansin. Wala pang BL series prior to the pandemic na Pinoy. No? Pero nakita nga na may market. So dito nga yung fetishism na naman sa sexuality din, ng gay sexuality, ang ginagawang market item for selling point dito sa BL series na ito. No? To be able to, at tandaan natin, ang market for the BL series ay hindi naman talaga bakla or queer. No? Ang market dito ay babae na gusto itong mga suyuan na to na klase dahil nga mas demure kaysa sa mga kilala nilang mga lalaki nang liligaw sa kanila or mga boyfriends nila, mas in touch sa mga emotions nila, etc. So babae ang audience ito. So marami yung tumatangkilik nito na babae at supposed na sa traffic na ito. Hindi naman kaya i-sustain to, yung 2.8 million na yun ay hindi naman galing sa purely bakla community, no? Galing yun sa mainly straight women enjoying seeing two good-looking women fall in love, etc. So yun yung nature niya. Pero sa atin nga, ang condition nga lockdown. So mas katipiran showcase pa ito. Itong ganitong klaseng BL series na to kasi bahay lang shoot, condo lang, etc. So yun. Yung pangalawa, yung binabanggit, yung paano natin titingnan yung itong 4 hours plus every day na dinidevote natin sa social media, pabuti nag-enroll kayo sa YouM3. Di ba? Tungkol ito sa media, social media, literacy, critical literacy. Ibig sabihin, kailangan may critical literacy tayo sa ganitong mga tinatangkilik nating mga bagay para through teachers, to students, para ma-enlighten din yung mga kasamaan natin sa bahay. Bakit hindi sila dapat tumangkilik ng fake news? Paano nila madidetect ang fake news na ito? Etc. No? At very simple yun. Padala mo lang ng link na hindi totoo ito dahil ganito naman talaga nangyari dyan, etc. Ay tatamemi na siya na mali yung binasa niya na klase ng balita. So it's a kind of critical media literacy. Dapat alam natin lahat ito na algorithm. Pinapasok siya sa atin dahil na clickbait nga tayo. once click, parang yung pang ko, minsan naghanap ako ng isang item sa Google search, mamaya nandun na siya sa aking ads, personal ads na tailor-fitted. Na-gets niya na kung sa dami ng clinic natin, pinost natin, nilike, emoji natin, alam niya na kung anong may interest sa akin. So mga particular things na tailor-fitted yun sa atin. So ibig sabihin, at pag nag-click na ang isa, dadami ito ng dadami hanggang malulun tayo sa ganitong klase source of news na klase. So ibig sabihin, kailangan na critical media literacy, hindi tayo magiging mabuting tao, magiging mabuting mamamayan kahit 24/7 tayo nasa social media. No? Kailangan makapag-discern tayo ng information that will be useful, na may historical basis, may factual basis sa mga bagay na pinopost at nire-repost natin. Kailangan mag-intervene din tayo, wag lang tayo simple mag-post. Bigyan natin yung komentaryo natin kung bakit tayo disenchanted sa mga panahon na ito sa klase ng gobyerno na meron tayo. So ibig sabihin, kaya mas interactive na ito, hindi na rin pwede yung nire-repost lang natin itong It Girl sa TikTok at yun na. So kailangan natin mag-intervene magkaroon tayo ng sariling agency sa mga comments natin, etc. So ito nga yung kailangan ng higher kind of media literacy. Iba itong animal na ito na pumapasok at tinatangkilik natin on an everyday basis. Yung pangatlo, I suppose, dahil hindi nga nakakagawa ng pelikula, yung regional filmmakers of this time, so who takes on the power to name the regions, to world the regions? Eh di nakakagawa ng pelikula. So hindi ako magtataka na magkakaroon na tayo ng TikTok na ang characters mo ay isang Ilonggo, magiging, or even transnational characters mo, isang nasa Amerika na may ethnicity, at isang nasa Pilipinas na may ethnicity din na iba. Di ba? So ibig sabihin, ay ipapasok nila yun kasi nga ay yun ang hahanapin ng mga tao dahil sawa naman sila na pare-pareho na lang taga-Ateneo looking itong mga estudyante na ito na nag-aaral at mga problema ay kung ganitong klaseng concerns tungkol sa mga bagay-bagay na very specialized na klase. No? So ibig sabihin ay ita-take on ito kasi nga ay nag-abdicate na rin by the sheer political economic conditions of filmmaking in the regions, hindi makapagsalita yung regional filmmakers, hindi makarepresent. No? Kung medyo pagka media savvy lang talaga yung regions, ay easily nakapag-plunge in sila sa isang platform katulad ng BL. You get what I mean? Kasi ang access naman natin sa Thai BL is through subtitles, di ba? Mm. So pwede nag-take over sana yung regional filmmakers at kasi ang dami-dami ng DIY din na BL series ngayon na kung sino-sino na lang na hindi mo nakilala yung mga tauhan, makadiscover ka lang ng dalawang lalaki na may katawan at magandang itsura at may konting arte, pasok ka na. No. So ibig sabihin, dapat mag-take over din sila dito sa content na ito. Dapat magkaroon din ng siguro sa kanya-kanyang platforms sa regional filmmakers or regional groups para of films para magkaroon ng presence na kung saan mapapanood ang mga pelikula nito. Not just through festivals, pero baka may willing naman ay nasa Facebook video na siya forever na klase. Ibig sabihin, kailangan mas mag-create tayo ng ganung klaseng interest at traffic din sa klase ng films na ginagawa sa regions. Kasi nga ay nagiging invisible tayo at this time. At kung tayo invisible, then someone else will render for us the visibility of our ethnicity, of our identities and heritage.
Salamat, sir. Ma'am Kay has a question dun sa chat box and I think everyone can answer, Sir RT and then the other panelists. And she's especially interested to hear more about the point you raised about regional cinema, being a minority in indie cinema, that is in turn a minority as well. She's just curious how this relates, if it relates at all, to the notion of minor cinema in film studies, which somehow has a resistant bent, particularly against hegemonic filmmaking. Isn't this an advantageous positioning for this cinema then? Or is it more disadvantageous for regional cinema? If so, in what ways would this positioning be advantageous or disadvantageous? So yeah, the question is open for...
Jael, can you just repeat the first part of the question? Medyo nag-slip sa akin.
Ma'am Kay is interested to hear more about the point you raised about regional cinema, being a minority in the cinema, that is in turn a minority as well. So she's just curious how this relates to the notion of minor cinema and film studies, sir.
I'd be very interested to hear the comments of Gail, Hubert, and Jean here.
I'm not sure when it comes to film studies, but in my experience, for example, when talking to international, film people, being a minority, claiming, claim na I am a regional filmmaker and this is what I stand for and this is what I advocate for. It's good. It makes you stand out, I guess, in the international setting. That there is this kind of movement happening outside of the capital, and it really piques interest. So that's one advantage, no? But when it comes to local funding, I guess that's the disadvantage when you now go to so let's say I have this project, really amazing Cangrejos project. It went to this place. French people really like the project, but then when I go to a studio, they would still be, hesitant to entertain, I guess, because yun nga, regional siya. They are not yet sure about the market. So I don't know. So both advantage, disadvantage siya. So I guess it's just a matter of which point of view you are going for. If you are going for international, then it's an advantage because you are not just, you are offering something else from the national cinema that they know. Yun. Makes sense ba? I don't know.
Yeah. Claire, your film as well, especially A House in Pieces, diba? They've been shown in international film festival. So I think you can.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question actually, because it can be answered in different layers. I think in terms of, like, say, meaning making, maybe there's a different answer in terms of economics and the how the industry works. That's also another aspect, right? So for me there's not one particular answer to this question. I do agree with this idea that probably yes, it can be looked upon as like more having a resistant bent in like the minor cinema film studies idea. But then at the same time, if you look at reality, it's really like this feeling of being like twice othered. It's very difficult in terms of the economics of it all. And I guess, like, for me, it takes so much privilege, the economics of it, in terms of, like, say, funding and so on. It takes so much privilege, or rather, like, my hierarchy, it's more important and more profound than the meaning making, because without all these, like, processes and systems that help you out, you cannot get your story across. So for me, like with A House in Pieces, for instance, it really was very difficult to find funding for this film. We started writing the proposal. We talked to so many people. We talked to FDCP. It's so hard because, like, I'm an independent filmmaker from Mindanao. I'm a woman, and I don't know anyone in the documentary in circle. I mean, just a few, like Diti Carolino, but just a few in Manila, because I don't go out there. Like, I'm not based there. So, and I noticed that everyone knew each other and they knew how to get their funding. So what I did was just to, like, ask Ditsi how I could get funding outside. And we started out with, and And I think it's also for me, it was difficult as well because the subject is also difficult to sell. Like, who wants to, wants to watch a documentary about people who just, and especially Muslims who are trying to rebuild their lives after a war. So, and the comment was always like, oh, is it just like Al Jazeera, So may ano siya, may tainting, may taint na siya. So what I did was just to we got our funding first from, unfortunately, I guess, but it's not unfortunately, but like we got our funding from European funders, NGOs actually first, and then we got the DMZ grant in Korea. The DMZ, for instance, is very specific because of course it's in the DMZ, that the militarized zone, right? And they're interested in this peace, security kind of issue. So it's very niche, and I guess that's where being twice minoritized is concrete in my experience. We were only invited to talk about our film when we finally released worldwide and got a recognition there, and then we have to come back. And this is not just me. I've heard like Mindanaoan filmmakers talk among ourselves, and they would say, just make sure that your film, gets picked up by Rotterdam or something in Europe. And then by that time, you make it there, you can bring it back to the Philippines, and the Manila hegemonic circle will recognize it. So, yun lang.
Yeah. So, Sir Roland, or you Bert, before Sir Roland, would you want to add something to that?
For me kasi depende kasi para sa akin kasi syempre of course an advantage kasi syempre parang feeling ko home court, and parang kabisado ko na rin dito na, and nawala ako. Yun, nafe-feel ko lang kasi kung gagawa ko ano yung objective ng project. Parang, kasi for example, gagawa ko ng itong TV ko lang to or itong short film to. Gusto ko na siya i-pattern kung saan siya pupunta. Ayoko na magsaya ng oras na parang gagawa pa ako dito tapos wala naman siyang pupunta. So parang, ganun din. So parang, ganun yung pinuposition ko yung sarili ko na parang hindi tintapon yung ginagawa. Ayun. Nasagot ko ba? Tama ba yung...
Sir Artie.
I think maganda rin yung tanong na yun kasi nga at least sa NCCA medyo may awareness na support for regional filmmakers at yun yung portal para makapag-tap in nga. Yung mga projects na dinevelop tulad ng ECQ, halimbawa ay tailor-fitted for regional filmmakers mostly na kahit 16 lang ang kayang gawin every year. Para ituloy yung kanilang craft. Yung kanilang work, experience sa filmmaking. So, ibig sabihin, ang maganda sa position ng pag-claim din ang position ng pagiging galing sa regions ay pwede kayong pwede nakakapag-tap in sa ilang grants na otherwise hindi ibibigay dahil sa privileged positioning ng Manila. At maganda rin yung kwento ni Gail na even in other festivals na may ganong klase ay nagsimula na rin magkaroon ng recognition na iba yung Metro Manila na klase ng filmmakers sa regional klase ng films at filmmaking practice. And therefore, yung ginawa dati na kung saan nag-assert yung filmmakers ng region sa mga grant-giving bodies at Cinemalaya, Cinema One, ay ngayon nangyayari din on a international scale. No? Pero gusto ko rin yung model naman ni Hubert. Ang maganda, natutuwa ako dahil parang maraming models of regional filmmaking. Yung kay Hubert naman kahit saan mapadpad. Gagawa ko ng pelikula. Bahay kubo ito, makaisip ng kwento, etc. Gusto ko yun. Mas DIY nga yun. Pero at the same time, natutuloy-tuloy pa rin niya. Kahit may funding o wala, yung kanyang gustong gawin. At i-hampered nga ng funding na mas nag-dwindle nga ngayong nag-lockdown or mas tumaas ang cost to be able to do a kind of full length work. Mas mataas ang cost ngayon na hindi naman tumaas yung grant, like for example. So, kailangan maraming models na ma-develop tayo until finally we come into a kind of model na pag synergize itong mga individual gestures or acts in regional filmmaking, becomes a very viable and sustainable project na hindi na ito nakakawing lang sa development ng anything sa Metro Manila, pero meron na rin iba pang portals for sources of funding elsewhere na steadily available at hindi na klase nga.
Yeah, salamat kasi 'di ba, hindi rin lang na naman natin pwedeng langkapin yung regional filmmaking as one. Katulad nung shinare nung speakers natin, sobrang iba-iba nung experiences nila, nung processes nila. And yeah, sir, ang gandang point no na maybe we can develop a framework coming from this personal experiences and this point of views ng regional filmmakers themselves. Yeah. May questions pa po ba? We can always ask our speakers kung may questions after the discussion. I think they will be very much happy to answer your questions. In the meantime, maybe call on Sir Dexter para mag-synthesize nung talk natin. Sir Dexter?
Hello.
Hi, sir.
Magandang hapon sa lahat. So, pagbati sa ating mga minamahal na speakers. So, 4 ang tinampok ng ating sesyon ngayon na 4L, loob, labas, lawak at lalim, isang pagtaya ukol sa paglikha ng pelikula mula sa rehiyon sa panahon ng pandemya. Maraming insight, marami tayong natutunan at nakuwang mga mahalagang puntos tungkol sa ibinahagi sa atin ng 4 na mga speaker. Naririto naman ang aking synthesis no, na mapipiga sa mga naibigay at naibahagi sa atin ng ating mga speakers. So, ito ay nakabase doon sa batayang topic no, ng ating usapin ngayon at ito yung loob, labas, lawak at lalim. Sa tingin ko, ang loob na matatagpuan sa bawat filmmakers natin at sa atin syempre mahal na chair ng Cinema Committee na si Dr. Roland Tolentino ay yung masasabi nating passion and courage. Nandoon yung pagmamahal sa kanyang craft at nandun din yung tapang upang magsiwalat at magbigay at magbahagi ng kanyang mga istorya. Makikita natin ito sa ibinahagi ni Jean, ni Gail at ni Hubert. So, naroon yung passion. No? Sabi nga ni Dr. Roland yung tungkol dun sa DIY, no? Thing. So, tuloy paglikha. Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao. So, kung mapapansin natin yung mga nagbigay no, ng kanilang mga danas o experience no, sa paglikha mula sa Luzon, sa Visayas at sa Mindanao, ay representatibo no, ng sabihin na natin ng pagmamahal no, ng mga manlilikha no, upang ipagpatuloy ang kanilang panata no, na makapagbahagi ng kanilang istorya sa bawat lugar na matatagpuan natin sa ating bansa. At ito yung mga rehiyon. So, nandun yung tapang na hindi mawawala. Lalo na dun sa ibinahagi sa atin ni Ma'am Jean, ni Ma'am Claire, no? Na may mga nakukompromiso o meron ba tayong mga dahilan para i-negotiate natin yung mga paninindigan natin upang makalika halimbawa ng isang dokumentaryo. Sa kaso naman ni Gail, no, na producer, filmmaker, at lahat-lahat na, makikita natin yung kahalagahan na buuin, no, lumikha ng isang kilusan o movement. Ang magandang naibahagi yung Visayan movement, no, yung Binasaya movement, na kung saan inaalagaan ng ating mga young filmmakers para makalika sa gitna, sa pagitan at sa loob mismo ng panahon ng pandemya. sa tingin ko, yun yung mga matapang na inisyatibo na ginagawa ng ating mga filmmakers. At bukod dito, ang inisyatibo at sabihin na natin yung passion ni Hubert, no, bahagi rin ng katapangan yun, no? Yung lumikha, maging bahagi, no, ng isang komunidad, no, maging bahagi ng isang komunidad, at mula dun sa loob ng komunidad ay makalikha ng mga istorya na maibabahagi natin. Halimbawa, no, nakarating sa Cannes ang kanyang maikling pelikula, no, na Pabasa Kang Pasyon. At syempre, ganun din kina Ma'am Jean, no, Ma'am Claire at ni Gail, no, yung lumalabas, no, dumadako na ako dun sa labas, yung paglabas ng mga istorya o naratibo na ito, hindi lang dun sa rehiyon, kundi sa bansa, at hindi lang mula dun sa bansa, kundi sa mismong global, no, na espasyo na kung saan maaari nating maibahagi ang ating mga naratibo o istorya. At dumako tayo dun sa lawak. Malawak yung mga na isasagawa, no? Yung mga accomplishment ng ating mga filmmakers na kung saan ay binibigyang pugay din ng NCCA at yung pugay na binigay sa atin ni Sir Roland. So, mahalaga na makita natin na hindi lang tayo isolated, no, sa maliit na espasyo natin bilang individual, kundi bahagi ng isang malawak na komunidad. At saan matatagpuan ang komunidad ngayon, lalo na sa panahon ng pandemya? Ito ay ang komunidad na matatagpuan natin sa cyberspace. Isang komunidad na kung saan ang nagtatakda yung sabihin na natin, kaalaman natin sa teknolohiya o yung online exposure ng mga kabataan, ng mga manonood ng ating mga audience. Sa tingin ko, magkakaroon ng malakas, no, na dating, no? Sabi nga ng ating yumaong national artist kailan lang na si Dr. Benvenido Lombera, yung konsepto ng dating, malakas ang dating ng mga istorya na ibinabahagi ng ating mga manlilika, ang mga filmmakers mula sa riyon. Sa katauhan ni na Ma'am Claire, ni na Gail at ni Hubert, no? So, mahalagang maitampok ito. At naitampok nga natin dito sa ating usapan ngayon sa 4L Loob, Labas, Lawak at Lalim. Isang pagtaya ukol sa paglikha ng pelikula sa panahon ng pandemya. At ang pinakadulo ay yung sinasabi natin lalim. Ano ba yung lalim? Ito yung matatagpuan dun sa mga content o nilalaman na nililikha ng ating mga filmmakers. May iba't ibang storya, diverse, no, na mga naratibo na matatagpuan natin na maaaring pagugutan natin ang ating lakas bilang isang individual at bilang bahagi ng isang komunidad. Hindi lang ang rehiyon ay hindi lang isang hangganan, no, o isang teritoryo na mayroong hangganan. Winawasak natin ang mga hangganan ito ng ating individualidad. Ganon din ang ating bilang bahagi ng isang rehiyon. Dahil nakikita natin yung lalim ng danas na ito ay matatagpuan sa iba't ibang istorya o naratibo na ibinabahagi ng mga mahuhusay at malikaing filmmakers natin sa kasalukuyan mula sa rehiyon. At sino ba yung kumukonsumo nito? Malaking bahagi siguro, no, nabanggit na ni Sir Roland, yung akademya. No, kaya nagaganap itong isang usapin na ito sa universidad, lalo na dito sa UP Los Baños, na kung saan bahagi ng diskursong ito ay ang ating mga estudyante. Kaya bibigyan ko na rin ng pugay ang ating mga estudyante na bahagi ng ating event na nanatili upang maging bahagi ng talakayan ito. Una, Ma'am Jean Claire D. ng UP Visayas, ni Ma'am Gail na mula pa sa Cebu, or tama ba ako? At si Derek Hubert na mula pa sa Bicol. Isang mabunga, no, na talakayan ang naganap ngayong hapong ito at nagagala kami na naging bahagi ang bawat isa. At actually, naganap na yung synthesis sa ibinahagi sa ni Doc Roland Tolentino. Maraming salamat po. Palakpakan natin ang bawat isa sa atin.
Salamat sir. Maraming salamat po sa mga dumalo, sa ating mga speakers. Let's proceed to the awarding of the certificates. The Literary and Cultural Studies Division, Department of Humanities awards a certificate of appreciation to Hubert TV in recognition of a significant contribution as a speaker for Loob, Labas, Lawak, at Planning. Isang pagtaya ukol sa paglikha ng pelikula mula sa rehiyon sa panahon ng pandemya. Yung 3GE conversation held on October 11, 2021 via Zoom. Signed by Jael Mendoza, coordinator ng yung 3, Catherine Gonzalez, Festival Director of Pelicultura 2021, Gerard Eusebio, Head ng LACS Division, and our Chair, Lenora Hutagana, Chair ng Humanities. And then our certificate for Gail Osorio, Jean Claire D, and of course, Dr. Roland Tolentino. Again, maraming salamat po sa pagpapaunlak at pagbabahagi ng inyong karanasan at alam sa naging usapin natin ngayong hapon. Maraming salamat po ulit. Okay lang po bang mag-photo op?
Wave Beats Music.